My okay. Well, howdy, everybody. Welcome back to another Let's Talk Bees here on Bruce's Bees. And we have a special guest tonight, Mr. Kamon Reynolds. Kamon is fresh off of the Bee Expo up in Kentucky. And I bet you're exhausted, Kamon, but we sure appreciate you being here.
Well, thanks for having me, Bruce. This is the only way we can get to hang out, really, is like this or something. I'm not really that exhausted. I'm so excited that it's over so I can prep things that I want to do besides the expo. And so I'm having a blast. There's a lot of things I've had to put on hold for months, just to make sure the expo got off proper. And so, no, I'm excited. I'm loving it.
Awesome, man. Well, I was able to attend this year. I had actually debated not going. We had a wedding on New Year's Day, and I was, we were so exhausted and tired from that. But I think about maybe about a month or so beforehand, I decided to go, and my good buddy Brian Lee actually gave me his ticket, though I was going to just purchase a ticket, and so that helped. And then Brian Coper from Castle Hives and I, we roomed together and just I came as an attendee more than as a creator.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really kind of fun just to participate. And I went to some of the classes. I spent a lot of money, which was good. That was one of my goals, was to spend some money, and I got some products. Sure. And I just really had a great time. And I'll tell you, one of the coolest things at the expo this year was the honey. What was it called? The honey bar, or whatever you called it.
The North American honey bar.
Yeah, it was great, man. I thought that was a great idea. I walked by it several times, obviously, but the last thing I did before I left was I went through and tasted probably at least half the honeys. There was so many honeys there. I would have been, I think I had a sugar high. It got me probably to, maybe Nashville, just on the sugar high from the honey tasting bar or something like that. But it was a wonderful, wonderful event. And we appreciate you putting that on for us. And I guess this year it was bigger than ever, and who knows what the future holds. But I think things are starting to get kind of, zeroed in on that thing. And every year you guys add things and do things a little bit different to improve the situation. So we appreciate you putting that on for us.
Well, thank you, Bruce. I appreciate you coming again. And I think it is fun in some ways being a content creator like you have in the past, and also for our vendors. But there's been several of my friends who have been vendors and then took a year off, and you're just able to enjoy it a lot more. Obviously, it's work whenever you're having to just purposely make sure that you are here at this time and you're doing these videos at this time, or you have to be by a booth. And so I understand that. I think I spent maybe 20 minutes of leisure the entire time for the trade show, which was a little bit of a disappointment. But at this point, that's my role. And you can't, throw the party and kind of lead everything and then also enjoy it at the same time. And so I just at this point just enjoy seeing other people enjoy what we do, and also some areas where maybe we're helping people out, seeing small companies be successful, and also seeing some individuals meet some people they want to meet. So it's just fun for me.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I just it was laid out differently this year. The layout was kind of totally different than last year. And so I had no idea where anything was. And there were some things, I'm sure there were still some things I didn't see. I think I walked through the vendor hall, I don't know, through the trade show 6 times, maybe more. And I still don't think I hit all the spots I wanted to hit. I did end up, I did kind of get most of what I planned on getting when I went there. Plus I picked up a couple of other things as well. So it worked out great for me, but there were a couple of things afterwards. I'm like, oh, I wish I would have gone and seen this. And there was a couple of vendors I think that were there that I never did see, but anyway, it just was incredible. And just going as an attendee instead of trying to create content, it was kind of cool because I could just kind of meet people, talk to people, not feel the pressure of trying to capture, everything. And so it went well for me, and it was just tremendous. We appreciate once again you doing that for us.
Thanks. I want to say a shout out to you on your 30,000 subscribers, Bruce. Congratulations on that. And of course, Brian says the same thing with the $20 donation. And then also I want to say a shout out to Sawmill Charlie, who has a birthday today. So happy birthday, Charlie. Hope it was a good one, and all that kind of stuff.
Awesome. Yeah. And we could shout out so many people in the chat here already. We've, this is something I kind of threw together today last minute, and I guess we got about 60 folks on here, so I hope that'll increase. I'm sure it will as we go along.
Send me the
And
link. I haven't shared it yet, so maybe we can get that number up a little bit.
that'll be great. Great if you could. I would appreciate it.
Brian, where's the link? Brian's helping Bruce in the background. He's
Yeah.
not quite Chris. He's a little bit more chill. Chris is like Brian on like 2 Red Bulls or something.
Yeah, we actually have Brian Coper from Castle Hives in the background. He's in the back office tonight helping out. I told Kaman he's my Chris Medeiros because I can't. When I try to do this by myself, I miss questions. I can't see the comments, and I know I miss things. But he's going to kind of help keep us rolling here. So I wanted to recognize him, and I appreciate you being here, Brian, helping us out tonight. I did want to, and as far as the 30K goes, I appreciate that. It's because of all the support of folks in the chat and other people. The progress has actually been very slow lately. It's been a little discouraging, but we finally made it to that thing. And I've gotten to the point now to where subscribers are great. I appreciate it, but it's just, I hope I'm creating content that can help folks.
Mm-hmm.
The vlog style content I've done in the past, I'll continue to do some of that, but I do want to get more into some beekeeping basics, some things, kind of going through some concepts like we're going to talk about tonight that can hopefully really help people figure things out and figure out what direction they want to go in their beekeeping endeavor. Because Kaman, as we all know, there's so many different ways you can do it. I've heard it said different ways, but what I like to say is, ask 5 beekeepers a question, get 10 different answers. And so there's so many different options, and it can be very confusing and almost paralyzing for folks that are new.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully we can break it down in a simple way so people can kind of know, help figure out what they want to do and become better beekeepers. I know that's really what we've done a lot of talking in the past, and that's kind of what your whole objective is with your channel, with the expo and everything else, is to put people information in front of people so they can be successful, keep their bees alive, and not get discouraged and bow out after a year or two of keeping bees.
Yeah, this is an awesome hobby. I met a couple people at church this morning, and it was the first time. My dad's an elder at this church, but it was the first time I was asked to do anything there, and they asked me to do communion. And I do a lot of public speaking, and of course on YouTube and various things, and I've gotten pretty comfortable with that. It just doesn't affect me. Getting in front of the folks at the expo, it just, I don't get the butterflies. I don't really feel like, oh man, the pressure's on. But I did this morning. But it could be the fact that my mom and my dad were both watching me, and I knew exactly where they were in the room. There's that. But also it's a little more serious matter. Well, when I got off the stage, I didn't mention anything about bees. I definitely wanted to make a point of not doing that, because it's not all about bees. But a couple people recognized me and didn't know I was there, and that's really weird. When you have so many people who recognize you from the bee stuff. And one of the guys, we had sold his brother and his niece a nuke the year before, and he just said, yeah, they've been talking about you and all that. And he showed me a picture, and I was like, yeah, I recognize him. And then Byron Ferris, who does the creamed honey at the show, one of his cousins apparently worships at college side with me. There's like 800 or 900 people, and so, which is very big for what I'm used to. And he told Byron about it, and then Byron texts me and sends me a clip, because I guess even that is on YouTube nowadays, and so they're able to watch the sermon and the other stuff on YouTube. I'm just like, wow, that's not 2026. I don't know what is, but that got me nervous. And so ultimately, I want to help people out with the bees, because it's a great hobby and there's a lot of good people in it. From all kinds of walks of life. And so people should be able to enjoy beekeeping. And this isn't just in beekeeping, but in farming. We've gotten so far away sometimes from managing things properly. Bees are not too dissimilar than raising chickens and cows and goats and stuff. They have different needs, but the fundamentals, everything needs nutrition, needs good habitat, and needs to have low pest pressure. Is that's why we say great queens, dead mites, and good nutrition. Those are the fundamentals of every organism being healthy. And so we just want to teach those fundamentals to where people can really enjoy having alive bees, which most people, that's all they want, is good, healthy bees. And then after that, anything else is just a bonus.
That's very true. And it's funny you mentioned speaking in church. I actually, that's kind of where I got my start. I was the first time I remember ever getting in front of people to speak really significant, like adults. I was 12 years old, and I was the leadership of our youth group, and I was asked to speak in front of several bishops of our church in Montgomery, Alabama. about some principle, and I was pretty terrified, but I had a great leader, a great instructor in my youth class that kind of helped me figure out what to say. And it was an eye opening experience to me to be able to do that and to do some quote unquote training of grown men
Mm.
for certain things. And it was pretty neat. And so and then I went on a mission for my church, and I've spoken, and I've been in different positions my whole life. So speaking at church is quite, it's not that hard for me. And that's, I think, where I learned some of my skills and being able to talk to people and not be intimidated. But everybody's got their own story, and it's pretty cool. But we are 10 minutes in, which is I think that's a good introduction period to kind of let folks hop on here. Got about 80 folks on here, and I think the number will continue to climb as we move on. And I hope a lot of people watch this afterwards, because I think now we're going to get into the meat of some things that are really important. You mentioned great queens, dead mites, and proper nutrition. Today we're going to talk about focus on that second part of that, Kaman, because there's so much confusion and so many things out there, different products, different ways to keep bees, different ways to keep the pests under control. And I wanted to just attack it tonight with you. I know you're well versed in all the different, if not all the different techniques, at least most of the ones that we've all heard of. Probably know a lot of things that I've never heard of out there, because you're on the cutting edge of these things. But I thought we could just talk about, mite treatments. I want to attack it in about 3 or 4 different parts. Number one, as we all know, there are many ways to do it, many different products out there, and some, ways to do it where we don't use products. But I thought we start off talking about organic treatments, which is the way that a lot of people are turning in this day and age.
Sure.
Organic treatments of the bees. The second topic I would like to attack is non-organic treatments, or, other products you can put in the hive. Thirdly, alternative methods, such as some of the newer things out there, Varroa, Varroa, and just maybe a vaccine to help with virus loads, things like that. And then we may hit on treatment free a little bit towards the end, depending on how time goes, just to kind of give everyone kind of all the options that we're familiar with, and hopefully help people make some informed decisions. So if you have any questions, I'm not sure how many we'll be able to answer, just with the, we got a lot going on here, but if you could put them in all caps. Brian Copeland from Castle Hives is in the background. Maybe he can capture some of those, or I'll try to as well. And at the end, if we have time, we may address some of those. But otherwise, Kaman, why don't we just dive in and just talk a little bit about the different organic treatments, pluses and minuses of each, and we'll just have a little discussion about it. And folks in the comments, feel free to just kind of carry on your conversation there as you always do, and let's kind of hash this thing out a little bit.
Sounds like fun. I want to say hi to several people I know in the comments. Brian Lee's in the house. Eric from Colorado, who came to the conference. Good to meet you, Eric, this year. And several people. I want to address one comment by Dennis. And he's like, Kaman looks like he needs to put on some weight so he'll look older. Well, I probably need to grow a beard first and foremost. And I'm 5'6". And so it doesn't take much weight to add on to someone my size. Someone that's 6 foot tall, add 20 pounds and, hardly know. I put on 20 pounds and I look like the Michelin Man. So I got to be careful. And, I actually, I have a weird diet. That's why I got into bees. I can eat some, normal American food, but I've always struggled with sugars and various things. That's what got me into beekeeping, because I had some sensitivities, and we were looking at a lot of different options. But as far as treatments go, you want me to just kind of rattle off the organic ones right now and how I see it, Bruce?
Sure. Just kind of talk about the different organic treatments, because I know a lot of people are into that, and I don't blame them. I know,
Sure.
like, I think Bob Benny pretty much uses organics, and stays away from some of the other things. And I think a lot of people are trying to head in that direction. I'm not opposed to using whatever it takes. Of course, I would rather go organic if I could, but I'm not opposed to the non-organic things. So just hop in there and see, kind of just let us know the pluses and minuses of each, and maybe a little bit about your experience with each that you've used and tried.
So my first experience with formic acid, which is one of the organic acids, and the reason they're a very clean and good acid, for those who don't know, is formic acid, oxalic acid, and something like a hop guard, and thiamol. These are very natural, normal building blocks of the world, especially the formic and oxalic acid. And if you're eating food and interacting with very much of Mother Nature, you're going to be exposed to low levels of these acids, especially oxalic acid, which, if you eat greens, there's a lot of it in there. And when oxalic acid heats up in a vaporizer, if it gets too hot, it turns into a lot of formic acid, and part of it goes into H2O. And And then as it breaks down in the hive, even if you administer at the proper temperatures, and this is one of the reasons I'm a fan of the instant vap, is because I'm very close to the inventor of that product, and he's done more research, in my opinion, on those machines than anybody else has. There's definitely more research in those instant vaps than any other vaporizers I know of. And so that's why I use them. However, that oxalic acid breaks down into formic acid, H2O, and CO2, which all these things are very natural. And the formic acid and the oxalic acid don't build up in your wax. They don't build up in your honey. You're allowed to use oxalic acid and formic acid with honey supers on, because within a very, very short period of time, they break down and also just leave the colony, and all the levels go right back down to where they were before, usually within just a couple of days. And so they're very, very safe products, but that doesn't mean that they don't have some side effects on the bees. And so I think a lot of times people think organic, that means gentle. Well, formic acid, when it's in its pure form, is very acidic. It burn the skin off of you if you touch it. And I've accidentally done that before, and it doesn't hurt really bad, but a lot of your skin will peel away. So definitely, wear the proper protection with these things. Formic acid, when I tried it years ago, I didn't use it properly. And with these acids or any strong product, and that typically falls into the category of formic acid in the form of, in America, pretty much the only thing we can use is Formic Pro. And then with the thymol, we have Apagard, and there's a couple other options out there like Apalifar, but mostly it's Apagard. And this is a thymol gel. When we use these products, they off gas faster in high heat. And then there's a big difference between the colonies that you're putting them in and also colonies that are on their back foot and weak. And so all of these things stress the colonies to a degree, not as much as the mites are going to, but many beekeepers wait too late in the season to apply them. And so maybe if it's a little too hot, and so that makes it off gas quicker, and your colonies are already being bludgeoned by the mites, this you'll blame the treatment on the loss for your colony. And sometimes it's just you waited too late, and it was just an added stressor to a colony that was going to perish within the next month and a half or two. And so I strongly urge people to not wait too late. One of the biggest mistakes with any of the treatments is people waiting until late August or September to begin. There might be some places up north you can do that, but I'm not aware of them. Even in Canada, you've got to get your mites slow earlier than that, because you need to have that strong winter cluster. And so I want to check all of my colonies, no matter what product I'm using, in August. And we're going to do an alcohol wash. And even if we're treatment free, then I especially want to do an alcohol wash so I know how to breed and select for my bees. But with the organic products, it's best to not count on any of these products. Synthetics or organics to give you 90%. And with the organic products, start early, because on average, in my experience with these products, more often than not, we're not going to get that 99% kill rate. We're going to get somewhere in the 80s. And so, if you have a high mite load, one treatment might not be enough. And we start early. We treat more than probably anybody that you know, unless you know some hardcore commercial beekeepers. And because of that, we're able to make the organic acids work. And I like them because I'm in the business of creating a health food. I think most beekeepers feel that way, but we have to be realistic about these products and also be realistic that not all of our colonies have the same mite load. There's a lot of events that happen, swarming, requeening, when we split the bees, whatever it is that affects the mite population. And so if we just blindly treat 10 colonies, we might be good in 8 of those, but if 2 of them still have a decent mite load left because they were really high and you just didn't know, it's going to buy you some time with that treatment, but they're still going to collapse in the later part of the year. And the problem with that is when those colonies typically collapse in September or October in the warmer areas, they're going to have food left over, and they're also going to have billions of copies of viruses and possibly a lot of live mites too, that the other colonies are going to rob those colonies as they get weaker. And now you're going to infect and infest all the rest of the colonies in your yard. And the last thing you want is your winter clusters of healthy colonies to have all these copies of viruses because those colonies collapse in your yard. So I think it's extremely important with all of these systems to monitor your mites. I like the organics, but they're not perfect. You don't want to use them on too weak of colonies, and you have to mind the temperatures. But I use formic early in the year. I use thymol, and strong colonies really take them well. Weak colonies do not take the organic acids very well.
Now, when you mention early in the year, do you mean fall? Or do you mean early like now, January?
So my treatment schedule, I'll just run through that because it's really quick. I consider the reset is December and January, but we have the lowest brood count typically in early December for us. And so I want to do 2 rounds of oxalic acid vapor in December. And I want to get as much of those mites down as possible. And if you're maybe where Bruce is or further south, you may never have a brood break, especially if you're running Italians. And so you may want to do more than that. And that's my reset. And then I'm not going to do another treatment until about April. And this is when my honey supers are on. And I'll throw on a pad of oxalic acid, just one, but it's on a really strong colony. And what we're going to do is split these colonies in March. I personally like to split them, pull a couple frames of brood, maybe 3 frames. If it's really strong, 4 frames of brood. And this is where I make the nukes that I sell off. And so after we've done that, we put on our honey supers, and then we'll come back later after we check for swarm cells, and we'll drop 1 pad of formic acid. And it's not about getting the 90% kill. It's just about dropping some of the mites. Cause I know dropping mites early in the season, 1 mite in April is probably worth like killing, 15 to 20 later in the year. And so I want to get that early. And that 1 pad also really, it doesn't knock the bees back far, but it just slows them down just a hair. And in my opinion, retards a swarming. And so I'm kind of doing a twofold dealio there. And when I come back on the next treatment, I drop oxalic acid extended release. And it doesn't kill a lot of mites, but it just kind of holds the line. And so we're just trying to slowly chip away at them. And you can make some of these pads. You can purchase Varoxan, which is one of the more natural treatments. It's a newer treatment. It's just oxalic acid and glycerin in a cellulose, not a sponge. It's like a cardboard type strip. And those work pretty good, but the mistake is, and I don't like how the company labeled it. I know that some people aren't going to like me for this. I do not like how bold they were on how effective it is because no one's experienced that. In the history of oxalic acid extended release, no one's ever experienced that. And to me, oxalic acid extended release is at best a hold the line treatment. I think it does good at that, but you have to put it on when the mites are low or you won't get good results with it. And so when we're putting that on, and I've done a lot of mite washes, so typically I don't see anything above a 1% infestation till about late June, July. And that's when you should start treating, in my opinion. Are your bees hurt? Do they look bad? Absolutely not. They look great at that point. Unless you're just lucky, you probably won't even find a mite in that hive. However, that's the whole goal, is to never let the mites get to the point where they're impacting our bees. So when my honey supers come off in the 2nd week of June, we strip them all off really quick. And then I am going to hit them with thymol, typically. That point, I'll give them a dose or so of thymol. A lot of times, because it's so hot in June, I can't use the 50-gram dose. I'm using the 33-gram dose. And I'll hit them with a couple of those. And then usually I put another round of oxalic acid extended release. I don't do the Varoxan 8 strips. That's just too many in the way. If I'm doing a double deep, I'll have 4 strips in there. Or if you're using the Randy Oliver sponges, those can help. But the sponges do not work good if you have them in a single deep configuration without any boxes above. You really have to have bees walking over the top of them. So a double deep hive, having those pads in between works really good. Having them on top of a single, just with a lid right on top, does not work hardly at all. And then that we're done until we get to August. And in August, we're going to go through and do alcohol washes. And we're going to find a lot of colonies don't need a treatment because we've been chipping away at them all season long as we do our inspections. But we are going to find some hives that do need it, and we're going to hit them. And what's awesome is our fall flow is in September, and I'm going to have just robust bees, very good looking bees, and they're going to be able to capitalize fully on that fall flow because they're healthy. And then I'm going to have really big clusters, and that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm checking several of my hives. I'm just really thrilled with where they're at, but we really target nutrition. We do really we always have young queens available throughout the season because that's our number two reason for loss outside of Varroa. And our mite strategy is we put a lot of work into it. But if you put a lot of work into it, even if you're a treatment free beekeeper and you know what's going on, so you can identify the problem colonies, um, the alcohol wash is a pain in the rear, and I do not enjoy doing it. But man, it's saved me a lot of money.
Sure. I my treatment strategy this past year, I've never, usually what happens to me here is like right now, I'm going to be doing a bunch of splits in about, mid February. So I've always thought, hey, it's great to be on top of your mites. So what I've traditionally done is hit them with OAV basically throughout the winter, sometimes almost weekly, and just hammered them and hammered them, hammered them. And then, when I really probably should put something on about now, or in the year, I'm starting to do splits. And what's traditionally happened is, I really don't get anything done until the honey supers come off, and then I have issues. And so then I got to be trying to backtrack, throw different things in there and try to take care of them. Last year, I actually got Varroa in all the colonies in March, and I didn't really take the time to do a lot of mite washes. I knew that I think the numbers were pretty low into the winter, if I remember correctly. And so I'm like, well, I'm just going to get this in here and keep the numbers down. Pulled the honey supers off. I went ahead and I got a really good deal on enough Varroa to do it all again. I think I had 900 strips. So I just hammered them, when the honey came off, I put them in there again, did checks, did testing in September, and the numbers were not good. The numbers were not good at all. And so then I hit them with 6 rounds. I know there was brood in the colonies. I hit them with 6 rounds of OAV, 4 grams per box, the first 3 rounds, and then 4 grams per hive, the second go around, and did some checks, and they still had quite a few mites. And so then I kind of freaked out a little bit. Mm-hmm. I talked to Greg Burns at Nature's Image Farm, and he had some formic that he had left over from the year. And so I bought that from him. And then, I'm putting formic in there October, late October, November ish. And I'm like freaking out about it because I'm like, man, I've got to get these mites under control. And it absolutely did the job. Our temperatures were in the 70s. We had some highs. Some of those days were in the 50s, and some were up in the 60s. I think we approached 80 a day or two, but man, it just absolutely hammered the mites. I had a few colonies, kind of like you mentioned, that were on the way out probably anyway, that went ahead and it finished them off, but I don't think it would have made it anyway. But overall, the bees are looking really well, really good.
Good.
And I haven't treated again since then. It was probably late November when I took that formic out. Whenever it was, went ahead and did a video on that and kind of talked about the results. Mm-hmm. And so now I'm sitting here, mid-January already, and actually past mid-January, and trying to figure out what to do now. I have some towels coming. I'm going to actually do the extend release, but I don't know if now is the time to do that, or if I should do something a little more aggressive here, just to make sure everything's knocked down, and then put those on maybe before the honey supers go on. I'm just not sure what to do there. So I'm kind of trying to figure out what my plan is for this year. What do you think? I know you're north of me. You're probably a few weeks different, but not super different from us here.
My maple pollen starts the second week of February, typically.
So we've got it coming in. Maple's blooming here right now. So we are in, and I didn't check
ahead of me then.
Yeah, I didn't check the bees this weekend, but I'm going to get in them next weekend. And so that's kind of my thought pattern. I feel like I want to get something in there that's going to take care of them. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, a couple of the organic treatments are actually, they're kind of a short, like the formic and the Apigard are both kind of short term. Like you don't have to leave them in there for 7. They're not a long term treatment. It's kind of a short, so you can knock them back with a heavy kill quickly, and then you can maybe put something more extended release on after that.
Yeah, you could. The problem with formic, and I think, is when you have a lot of damage to certain hives, they have a lot of holes from the Varroa mites in them. And the formic acid does a lot of more damage to those hives because they have so many holes in the bees because they've been fed on so much.
Mm.
And so the formic again really doesn't work good, and nothing really works good on colonies that are really riddled. But it does clean up mites late in the season. We have used it. I used it on one yard this year that I just didn't get around to doing quite as good as I wanted to, and it was about 36 hives that we dropped formic in. I'm wanting to say it was early to mid-November, and we just had a spell come through and it was in the 70s, and we dropped it. And you just watch those mites rain. There's not as much brood that time of the year either, and so it just really takes the legs out from underneath the mites, and I love that. The problem with the formic as well, and the delivery that we currently have in the Formic Pro is that, especially in decent weather that most people treat in, 80 degrees or very close to that, it off gases almost entirely in 4 days. And so the goal that Formic Pro has with the two pad method is they're trying to penetrate the wax and kill the mites or sterilize the mites that are in the brood itself. The, in order to do that, it has to be a really strong dose. And on weak colonies or colonies that are on their back foot, they really don't do well with that. The strong doubles do really good as well. And one thing I think we also have to consider is stronger hives can kind of dominate the space a lot better. They can control the temperature of the hive a lot better. Where again, a weaker colony struggles to balance all of that out, and so it may take a bigger hit. So, formic and thymol, both of these products, it's hard for newer beekeepers because sometimes they don't understand the nuance with these treatments. And so you're talking about what to do at this time of the year, and this is kind of going into the synthetic realm. But this is where Apivar and products like that are synthetic strips that go in between, especially the original Apivar used to be a really good product for that. You just put that in there, and it's works over the course of multiple weeks, and then of course you take it off a little bit before your honey flow, and you're good. Now supposedly Apivar 2 is effective. They've tweaked some things, and it's supposed to be a much more effective and very good. I haven't tried it. I don't know anyone who has, but the original Apivar product just does not work at all anymore. It works for very few people at this point.
Well, I would say, and we'll talk more about that in a minute, but I would say I never had I used Apivar a couple of years ago, and I'd had about 3 or 4 outliers that it didn't work on at all, but most of mine, it absolutely annihilated the mites still,
Mhm.
and, I haven't used it since then. Auburn did a study on my bees, Auburn University, all bees, and
And
they
it said they were
actually
marrying their cousins or something like that.
they actually found that my bees, my mites were not resistant to it. There were, they did this little study where they put a little, you may have read about the study. They put a
Yeah,
little section
actually,
of it in there, and they came and they sampled 10 of my colonies, and there was 1 or 2 that it didn't affect properly, but the rest of them, it absolutely worked. So, I may try that again, working up here. That's always been my treatment of choice in the past because it's so simple and it's been so effective. But I got to worrying about it because I freaked out when I saw 2 or 3 of my colonies were just ridiculously loaded up, and then I went kind of crazy with Apicard and OAV and all kinds of stuff, and I really got the mites down. But
sure.
anyway, so and this is Brian Lee's got a question here, but I think I'd like to go into the synthetics here in a minute. But so staying on the organics just a minute. I'm just trying to figure out what to do. So I think my concern with any of these treatments that are extended release is
Mhm.
if I put them in there now and then 3 or 4 weeks from now I do splits, how do I manage that? Because I'm taking a hive, I'm pulling the split out. Do I take the tabs with them? Do I put new strips in there? Do I leave the old strips behind? How do you manage like the splits themselves if you're in the middle of a extended release treatment, whether it be oxalic acid extended release, whether it be synthetics extended release, whatever it is? How do you manage the splits while you are in the process of treating at the same time, unless you're doing a short term or a OAV type treatment?
Sure. So, if you're using something like an oxalic acid extended release, or if you're using an Apivar strip or a strip like that, then they can move with the colony. If you're fixing to super them up, then the oxalic acid extended release is no big deal. But the Apivar would have to be removed in a timely manner before supers were added. And I just splits, I think, in my opinion, get you more mite kill because you're causing a little bit of a hiccup. And so you're actually going to have an opportunity to kill more mites during a split. And I think that's one of the reasons why what we do is very successful is we make multiple splits throughout the year. That helps the parent colony shed some mites. It also, as the new split is accepting their queen and there's that brood hiccup and not all of the brood stages go with the split, you're creating windows of opportunity there. And so having a release is good. Now, if you have a decent mite load, or you're really trying to push it down semi quickly, the oxalic acid extended release just won't get you what you want. It's great for a low mite load. I think it doesn't work that great above a 1% infestation because you don't want it to be above that. And so, if you have something lower than that, then that's good. But, if you're looking to keep it a little bit more natural because you're wanting to put honey supers on, then maybe one pad of formic once the splits and everything have kind of settled in and everything's laying good. But that's still a little bit of time. It's at least a 21-day situation. The queen's got her own brood coming out. Again, this is one of the biggest weaknesses with the organic acids. And thymol is they don't like thymol works terrible at low temperatures. I would not trust Apogard at all in the 70s or below. If it drops that low of a night, that's fine. But if it's going to get up in like the 80s or the high 70s, below 70s, there's a lot of research behind this. Apogard really, in my opinion, works best. Like the ideal temperature is low 80s and even to 90 degrees. I've used it multiple times at 90 degrees, had good success with strong, healthy colonies. Formic's a little bit more forgiving at lower temperatures. But again, these things are a lot more sensitive, whereas an Apivar strip, a synthetic, as long as the bees are moving around and touching it, and there's no resistance, they should be fine. And so the Apivar 2 strips, I think they're available.
Yeah.
But again, I don't know anything about them. And a lot of people have had issues with Apivar. I've done tests with it. Bob's done tests, and a lot of other people have not had success. But I've heard from researchers that if you don't use it for a number of years, that supposedly the mites become more susceptible to it again. I don't know. Ever since Apivar kind of took a nosedive, because I was using it every year for a while, I've just kind of gone away from it because I wanted to try to avoid using synthetics,
Yeah.
just because that'd be easier. There's a gentleman named Adam from Australia in here, and I just want to say real quick, and you'll get this from listening to the whole talk with Bruce and I, but don't underestimate Varroa. There's so many people I'm already seeing in Australia, and then there's Americans and Europeans saying, just let nature take care of itself. Yeah, it'll kill almost all of your bees in the process of doing that. And we've had a lot of research for decades and decades go into treatment-free bees. And there are some people that are doing it to a degree, but it hasn't taken on because it doesn't work for most people. I tried it for a number of years. Bob's tried it. You have limited success, but you're always going to have colonies that are susceptible to this. You're never going to have a fully immune bee. And that's just natural. Nature weeds out the losers, the ones that don't make up, the genetics required to survive. And so it really bothers me when I see these people like, yeah, you just go treatment free and you'll have 100% success. To me, that's a straight out lie out of the gate. Even before Varroa ever hit, people were losing bees from various maladies and will continue to lose malady from different maladies, and even just queen mishaps, not making it back. So any Australian listening to this video, be extra diligent. Your bees don't have any resistance at all. Can they get a little bit? Sure. But also realize that it's going to be finite. And even the best treatment free guys that I know that I've actually gone to their operations and they're legit, they work so hard on genetics and manipulations that give their bees an edge. It is not by accident. And for Australians, before you're going to get bees that have, an consistent resistance in the gene pool. I'm not talking resistance. I'm not talking immunity. It's going to be a while. So if you want your bees to be successful at a high level, and I know this is frustrating for you all, but it's also an opportunity for the beekeepers that do really focus and monitor with alcohol washes, learn how they grow in your season, and learn how to control them. Go above and beyond, because if you do, you're going to have good success with it. And that's an opportunity for you to excel while the competition's trying to figure it out. So, good luck with those mites, Adam. Kill extra for us.
Absolutely. Real quickly, we talked a little bit about, in theory, all the different products, and obviously you need to read the packaging. Kamon, you mentioned briefly with the Apigard, if you're doing it in the heat, sometimes you have to decrease the amount you do. And I've had great success doing that. When it's hot, it can be really hot as long as you decrease that dose down. But it tells you in the packaging how you should treat at the various temperatures. My experience with Formic, and I haven't used it a lot, but my experience is that it does completely. Sometimes it seems like it doesn't even affect at all, but some of them, most of them, it seems like it just basically it shuts the queen down. It basically it does kind of burn the brood. In my experience, the few times I've used it, but what I've noticed is a lot of these colonies that seem to be struggling. Sometimes it seems like that queen will come back. It's almost like they reset,
Yeah.
and next thing you know, there'll be a beautiful brood pattern. Have you noticed that as you've
Yeah.
used it?
That's a great point. And so every treatment that you use, even the more gentle ones like oxalic acid, are going to stress your colonies out. So when we treat, we are going to cause some stress to our hives. And especially with these stronger acids, yeah, you're going to see some stress. But if they have a good queen and they have a good colony, they can withstand a little bit of a knockback, and they bounce back because it lowers the Varroa mite and it lowers the pressure. You usually see these beautiful patterns afterwards. But I strongly urge people to not wait until your dearth periods. Maybe some of you guys don't know what that is. But for Bruce and I, we have these periods in summer of dearth, and these are already stressful periods because there's not as much nutrition, so bees don't live as long. And then there's also colonies robbing each other or attempting to rob. There's a lot more stress on the colonies. Yellow jacket populations go up, robber flies, assassin bugs. Maybe you have some European hornets. There's more stressors in summer, plus the summer heat. And again, there's not that nutrition coming in. This is why I think it's so important to keep your mite loads low early and keep them low, because if you're having to pull yourself back from the brink in a hot summer condition, you've got to get the mites down. The bees are already stressed. You don't see as much of that nice bounce back. And I've seen this time and time again where I've had some colonies that were laden with mites. I let them, they're way too high, but I had a couple, like a month and a half of flow ahead of me still. Those colonies will get hit with that treatment. It'll knock them back. But since they have that awesome nutrition and that flow in that low stress environment, they usually do really good. Where if I was to do the same thing with a month and a half of dearth ahead of me, they lose that momentum and they really struggle, because in a dearth period, it's pretty much bees have peaked at the honey flow and their population nutritionally and everything. And so for those of us who have a dearth period, it's going to be, as long as they have plenty of resources and a good queen, we're going to see the population kind of go like this. And it's just going to slowly taper off throughout the season. Then we're going to hit that fall flow and it's going to bounce up with good nutrition. That's going to be your winter bees. The problem of it is if it's naturally declining and then we hit them with a hammer method, whether that's an Apigard or a formic acid, and that drops them down a little bit more. And the strongest of the colonies can handle that, but the colonies that are kind of mid-sized, and especially the ones that are small size, in a dearth period, really do not handle that really good. So that's just again why I focus on getting this out of the way early more. We will do a treatment in August after a wash, but if we don't need it, we don't give it. And then when we do that in August, we also have a fall flow coming up within a matter of a couple of weeks. So they're really clean for the fall flow. We have to really consider the nutritional and seasonal things, and that's part of our treatment schedule.
That's part of the art of beekeeping, so to speak, is kind of figuring and learning all that stuff. And
just took 20 something years to get there. Yeah.
well, we're all still learning, and every year is different. So that adds another layer to everything. And before we kind of move on from the organics, if you could speak briefly on, as far as when you do OAV, kind of how do you know when to do it and how many cycles do you do with what amount?
So we've done a lot of different tests with this, and a lot of people smarter than us have done even more. Oxalic acid vapor, when it first became legal, people were saying 3 treatments, one a week for 3 weeks, will kill all the mites. That is so far from the truth. Do
Mm.
not believe that. Oxalic acid vapor and just oxalic acid in general is so natural, and that's why it's allowed to be used with honey supers on. The problem of it is it degrades so quickly in the hive. And so some researchers have talked that it takes like 15 minutes from the point of it getting onto the bees from a vaporization when it begins to break down. And so it's a flash treatment. And so some folks look at the sticky board underneath the hive and go, well, I'm still getting mite drops over a 3-day period. But are you killing new mites 3 days later that have emerged from the cell that wasn't exposed to the vapor? Or was it mites that were exposed on the day of the treatment and they just got a lower dosage than some of them, and it took them 3 days before they actually fell and died? So it's a flash treatment ultimately. If you have a decent mite load over 1%, you're going to have to do 7 to 8 treatments typically if you have a ton of brood in the colony. If you have a low amount, then you need less than that. And then if you're making a split, it's an opportunity. Be-
Mm.
don't ever use it with a virgin queen in the hive. Don't ever use it after a queen has just been released from the cage. Whenever that queen has been released from the cage, she needs to lay for about 6 to 7 days before you do an oxalic acid vapor treatment. Let her get some brood. And if you're using an instant vaporizer, 2 grams per deep box is plenty. And so there's a lot of research now around that number, and I'll get to that in a second. What's the coldest temp you can OAV your hives? There's people that say in the 30s, 30 degrees Fahrenheit. We get a lot of warm weather, and the looser the cluster, the better. You don't want bees tightly clustered because it won't penetrate a tight cluster. So I really prefer over 40 degrees Fahrenheit. And oftentimes in Tennessee, I mean, we get days in December when it's 60 degrees pretty regularly, at least one week during December. So we'll go in around 50, 60 degrees and hit them. But you can definitely do it in lower temps than that. So back to the OAV and the dosage. So that's been debated for a long time, and there's been tests done. And the researchers and the owner of the Instant Vap doesn't like going around and kind of calling out other companies. But I have no problems with it because I'm interested in using the best product. And there has been a ton of work done in Hungary in collaboration with Randy Oliver. And now I think it's gone through the University of Florida as well with Jamie
Yeah.
Ellis and Cameron Jack. And oxalic acid vapor degrades at certain temperatures, but it's not quite the heat that we've been told, because there is a little bit of a protective layer as the acid is being cooked off. And so 500 degrees Fahrenheit for the instant vap is an ideal level that will get you close to like 80 odd percent of your integrity of your oxalic acid getting into the hive. And what they're finding testing these old models that we were using years ago is the way that they're designed. You're only getting sometimes 30% of your oxalic acid into the hive. And some models are better than others, depending on if they're insulated, depending on how fast they cook it off. You don't want that oxalic acid sitting a long time on the pan because it's oxalic acid dehydrate. And so you don't want that water that's in there to cook off first, and then you have a bunch of dry oxalic acid. It'd be nice to have that Leidenfrost effect, and so you're getting that steam layer between the bowl and the oxalic acid, and you also just want to warm it up really fast and just jet it right out as soon as possible, because the longer it stays hot, the more it degrades. So you want it to get through the hive, you want it to get out of there. And so what we found is that the older models, you probably did need 4 grams a deep box, whereas these newer models, the instant vaps, 2 grams gets you the same amount of oxalic acid vapor as some of the models 5 or 6 years ago did. So,
That's awesome.
and it's less product. Your batteries don't, if you're using a battery powered model, you're not running through your batteries near as quick. So I could do like 2.5 grams a deep. I go ahead and just add just a little bit more, just in case, there's that one mite crawling around. I can't stand it to get away. Got to put it down.
I
And
hear you,
so,
man.
but oxalic acid vapor is a good tool, but you need a lot of treatments. If you have a high mite load, like 2%, it's probably taken 10 treatments, 11 treatments before you're getting that number down. And that's pretty consistent every 3 days. Bam, bam, bam. And then come back with an alcohol wash. And if you don't believe me, let a colony get that high and then start vaporizing them. And you'll find out that that's how it works.
Yeah, I had that experience. I can't treat every 3 days, so I just hit them. I hit them with more than what you mentioned, and did it for 6 weeks in a row. And I hammered them hard. And at the end of that, I still had some mite issues. So that's why I'm trying to look at maybe some other options as well. I think we've pretty well addressed, I think, most of the organic stuff, but there are a few questions I thought we could hit that pertain to the organic stuff here real quick. So you've kind of maybe addressed these a little bit, but we'll hit them real hard. Here's a question from Eric. Here it says, so how long after installing a nuke should I plan to start treating for mites? You mentioned OAV. What about these other treatments?
So definitely a nucleus colony. Ideally, you should be getting a clean nuke, and a good seller is going to sell you a clean nuke that shouldn't need to be treated immediately. They should have already sold that from a clean stock, but that's not always the case. And I've been the buyer years ago, probably 15, 16 years ago. I bought some nukes, and boy, they were just riddled. It was a very dishonest. So and some packages you get will have 300 to 400 mites already in there. I watched a buddy of mine who I won't name because he's not a controversial person, but he purchased some treatment-free packages. And I told him, I said, hey, man, vaporize them. I mean, you're not going to ruin the genetics with one vaporization, but when it's a package, you have an opportunity. Let the queen lay first. Again, let her, install the queen cage, let her out, come back 8 days later after when you think that she has been released from the cage, and then do a vaporization. And he put a sticky board underneath them, and yeah, they were treatment free. All right. I believe the guy. There's like 1,000 mites on all the sticky board.
Gosh.
And so for a nucleus colony, you want to use something gentle early on. Hopefully you have a low mite load. If you're okay with synthetics, maybe the Apivar 2 works. That's the only problem is, I don't really know anybody who's tried it. If you want to use something organic, oxalic acid glycerin strips like the Vaporization would be a good product. Or if you have a vaporizer, that would work for a nuke as well. And you would, maybe it's already pretty low, but just maybe you're already doing an inspection every week and you just feel like you want to hit it once a week just because you're already there. Nothing wrong with that. You're not going to hurt the bees just doing one gentle treatment a week like that. Kind of going, since we're already on kind of a vapor thing, Tom Sostman and Melissa asked, what's the difference kind of between the Larabi's compact and the new turbo? They're both great products with a lot of research behind them. The turbo is faster. It's got the power. I love it. So if you're in a big hurry, the turbo is a great product. It's actually slightly less efficient on battery usage because you have more muscle, but it is so stinking fast. And I do love that. But if you don't have a bunch of colonies, the compact is about 10 or more seconds slower. It's like the difference between 10 seconds and 22 seconds or something like that. It's not that big of a deal, and the compact works really well. And so for people who have the compact already, unless you're just really desperate to hurry up and get it done, there's no reason to upgrade. The compact is a great unit.
Awesome. Let's see. We got a few more things here real quick. And that one from Brian Lee. We'll wait till after synthetics for that one. Let's see. Here's one from Brian. He says, do you treat immediately after you harvest honey? And what do you treat with?
So I actually go a little bit further than just treating there, Brian. And this is something I didn't really explain earlier on because there's just a lot of nuance to what we do. We try to really, the mites and the viruses and everything's working against our bees. We're trying to think how many angles can we get to our advantage. And so I split all of my healthy honey production colonies immediately after the flow is over because they're powerful. I want to get some new queens in the operation. And so if they're usually after the honey flow, my honey producers are like 3 deeps worth of bees. I mean, they're just ripped. And so we can split that into 2 colonies. And then when we split them, we're creating a hiccup in the brood. And so I want to treat them with oxalic acid vapor if I'm going to do a split like that, because we are introducing a queen. If we use queen cells, we even get a bigger opening for the oxalic acid. And if you don't want to do the oxalic acid vapor, this is a good opportunity to put oxalic acid glycerin strips in, because again, the bigger brood hiccup, the more mite exposure. So the problem with making splits, though, in treating is if you're using something like a formic or an apiguard, that's really going to affect queen acceptance rates. It's also going to knock them back a little bit. And so something softer is a little bit better. In that case, until the queen's been accepted and laid for a couple weeks. And then we still don't want to just like drop 2 pads of formic acid on there or anything super heavy. I don't hardly ever use 2 pads of formic. It's just so rough. The only time I really use 2 pads of formic is when there's just a massive mite load. And at that point, it's a toss up. Like they're either going to die from mites, I know, and viruses, or this is going to bring them back from the brink. And so it's a roll of the dice. And the main thing is I just want to make sure I nuke them so it doesn't get robbed out by the other colonies. So that doesn't happen very often. But if we're not splitting them, it is immediate. We're stripping those supers off. If we're not stripping the bees, then as soon as we strip them off, we are hitting them with a thymol or 1 pad of formic, and then I'm going to come back and do the next pad of formic afterwards. If it's a synthetic, just follow the instructions and throw it in there.
Quick question here. I know this is kind of just confirming what your strategy is: strong queen, good nutrition, and dead mites, right?
Yeah, I mean, if you can check all those 3 boxes, the biggest thing to worry about after that is swarming. Seriously, we don't worry about winters. I know some people have legit winters, North Dakota, Canada, Vermont, places like that. If you're worried about winters in Alabama and Tennessee, you've got your priorities all wrong. If you have strong bees coming out of summer and plenty of food and a strong cluster into fall, winter, you're not going to have any issues with winter unless the lid blows off and they get 2 inches of rain. And
Sure.
if they're a strong hive, sometimes they still pull through the rain in winter. I've seen it before. It's crazy.
All right. Anderson,
Me
Homestead,
too.
glad to
Me
see
too.
Cami getting a break from expo work. I know you are too, Kaman. All right, great. Let's see. Uncle Junior says, did formic kill the queen? My experience with that is I don't think I think it does occasionally, but I kind of tend to think that younger, stronger queens just kind of plow right through it a little better. I
Mhm.
think so. Maybe the older queens, maybe not. And I do think if you got a weak colony, you put it in, especially if you use 2 strips, 2 pads, which is what I've done actually. I think that it can take them on out. And so I think it is pretty risky. But I've heard people say that the formic just kills the queen and all this stuff. But I also know that it's not, nothing is 100%. And I think more often than not, it doesn't. I haven't used it. I'm not a pro at formic. I've used it, I think 3 times. I tested on a few colonies the first couple of tries, and then I did on everything back in the fall. And my results were just phenomenal, actually.
Mhm.
The bees were clean afterwards, and the temperature were cooler. It wasn't real hot, so it was really perfect. I think it was perfect temperatures for it.
You
And I
know,
do
it's
think I do think weaker queens. I do think some queens are susceptible to it, but that was my fear: is if I take out queens right now in October, November, what am I going to do? And so
sure.
I went ahead and risked it because I had a pretty high mite infestation when I didn't need to have one. So
A lot of it is timing too, because bees have different expectations for the queen at different
mm,
times of the year. And
true.
so the bees aren't expecting the queen to perform at a really high level in November and October. And they expect actually pretty low laying expectations based off of the nutrition. Where you usually see a lot of supersedures on good queens is when they expect high output because she should be, and then they're not getting that, and then they're going to supersede the queen. So it's interesting that sometimes you can use the same dosage. And it's not even just temperature; it's what the bees are expecting from the queen at that point. And then I think something a lot of beekeepers, I know Bruce knows this, especially a lot of new beekeepers, and I didn't know this. You lose queens more often than you think, especially the further south you are. The queens lay a long time, And the colonies a lot of times supersede themselves if they're a good colony, and then you'll have some that don't supersede and they just follow a bad queen all the way to the grave, whether you treat them or not. And so sometimes I think what happens with hobbyists who never requeen their bees, running 10 hives, and then they try something like Apigard or Formic for the first time, uh, they already had some queens that were pretty bad anyways, or were fixing to be, and already had some issues. And that just was the straw that broke the camel's back. And of course, they're like, oh man, I had 10 colonies and 3 of the queens got taken out by the Formic. It's a terrible product, but those queens may have been pretty poor anyways.
That's true.
And so again, when I take mites out of the equation, queen loss is my number one reason. A queen events is my number one reason for colony loss. And you just have some colonies that swarm and the new queen doesn't come back. She went on a mating flight, didn't make it back. Queen events are an issue. So uh, mites is number one, but having those backup queens is really number two.
Chris says, evening everyone except for my snazzy dressed employer.
Snazzy. Well, thanks, Chris. You're still not getting a bonus.
Oh goodness.
That's right. So there was a question about the Easy Ox and how much better I think they might be. I have no clue. I haven't dug into them very much. It's a good question, Jonathan, and thanks for hopping on tonight. But it really depends on several things. We want bees to chew these things up. I see the best performance from the colonies that chew through the strips, even if it's quicker than what we were hoping for, because there's a lot of oxalic acid tied up inside all of these things. So I really like when I see colonies chew them up, even if it's faster, because there's just more mites get exposed to more oxalic acid. I hope that Mike with Easy Ox is putting a really high dose and is getting that through the EPA, because I really feel like Varoxan is a little too low per strip on the oxalic acid level. So I plan to talk to Mike about that.
I've been talking to Travis and Mike about it, and they're going to have 12.5 grams per strip, and the dose is going to be 4 per hive. So that ought to be way more than that's on the upper end of what I think that's about. Is that about in line with what Randy does? Or is he? I know it's way more. I think Varoxan is like 7 or 8 grams per strip, isn't it, or something?
Well, Randy does, I believe, 100 grams. So you have 50 per sponge, and a sponge is half of. Technically, each one of those is a half. So per sponge, 2 together is 25. like 100, I believe.
100 grams of oxalic acid or 100 grams of OAV, oxalic acid plus glycerin.
It's been a few minutes. I'll have to rewatch my video I did on it, but I think it's 100, but maybe it's only 50. Maybe it's 50-50, but still.
But this will be 50. If you have 12.5 per strip, that'll be 50 and a hive.
And that might be pretty good. Me having a brain fart. And this is where you have to be careful, folks. These YouTubers get on here. They haven't had their healthy fats for the day, and their brain's just kind of waning, and they say stupid stuff or incorrect things.
Let's see. And then we'll kind of close this. Yeah, that's 100 grams of solution, Mike says. So I think that's correct, which would be 50 grams of OAV. That's what my understanding in talking to them was. And I think that their whole goal was to maximize the max amount they could put in a hive is I think what they were trying to do. Mike can clarify me if I'm wrong. And anyway, the other question from Tom here, following up on and we're going to kind of move on to the next topic here pretty quickly, but this is from Tom and or Melissa here. My concern with the compact and the turbo would be the heat. Does the turbo get hotter? If yes, that is effective? You kind of talked about that earlier, but maybe clarify that for us, Kaman.
Yeah, so real quick, there's been more research on the turbo and the compact than any model anywhere, to my knowledge. And they literally have those machines dialed in and designed to preserve as much OA as possible. They've tried several different temperature configurations, model designs, and the turbo is dialed in at 500 degrees, which is the most efficient for that model. I even have the chart on my computer. I keep them. The heat the heat's not as big of a deal as long as it's really quick. It's very similar to where you can lick your finger and touch a hot surface really fast. Because that's if you watch those units, how fast they go in and how fast they jet out, it never comes close to reaching an actual temperature, because a lot of it is the water that separates out. So when oxalic acid goes through vaporization, it's really not vaporization, it's sublimation. It goes from a solid to a gas and then immediately back to a solid. But there's a separation of the H2O from it, and you get a little bit of formic in there. Hopefully, if you haven't done anything stupid, you have a lot of oxalic acid in there and you have some CO2. And as this all happens rapidly, you really want it to go really quickly because you want that steam from that water to propel that out of there and push it deep into the cluster of the bees and get it around the colony really good. And you also want it to push that oxalic acid into the hive at that low temperature before it has a chance to sit on that bowl for very long and actually reach a damaging temperature. So no, those units are really dialed in.
Awesome.
You're welcome, Brian.
Um, and we could just keep going. I think this will be the last comment we'll take on in the organic section. Then we'll move on. Adam in Australia, we're getting hammered here in Australia. Lots of hives, losing lots of hives as we are new to Varroa, which is you addressed that earlier, and that's why it's important to try and get ahead of it. But I know here in the States, and it was before my time, but I guess when it first hit here, it was a similar type thing, just lots of loss and still trying to figure it out. Maybe we're getting a little bit of a handle on it, but it's just going to take a little time to get there. Mm-hmm. Let's make a shift, Kaman. We appreciate everyone being in here tonight, man. We got a good crowd in here. A lot of people I recognize and some folks I don't. And we really appreciate all you guys being in here. Once again, we're going to kind of shift over to another topic now, but if you have any questions, put them in all caps. There are a couple of questions I didn't address because they apply more to the next couple of topics we're going to discuss, and so we'll just address them then. But Kaman, let's talk a little bit now about the synthetic type treatments. I know a lot of people are opposed to using them. Personally, I am not. I'm not opposed to using anything that's going to benefit the bees, but I know there are some more concerns with synthetics. So maybe here's where we're going to get into the discussions. The two synthetics that I have used, I haven't really used anything else. Really, the only one I've used is Apivar. Mm-hmm. And I personally have not had the horrible results that a lot of people have talked about. I think I talked to a commercial beekeeper. We had him on one night, and within the past couple of years, and I asked how he treated for mites, and he basically said he keeps his bees on an Amitraz drip, and so that's kind of what's happened over the years. It's a lot of beekeepers, especially I think a lot of commercial beekeepers, it was so effective that a lot of them have used that over and over and over again, and so we are seeing some mites that are resistant to the Amitraz. But you mentioned a little bit earlier that there's what I've heard too is that if you stay away from it for a while, the mites theoretically become more susceptible to it in the future. Mm-hmm. But maybe I know there's a few. So my concern with the synthetics, someone already mentioned in one of the questions, was some of the synthetics are not as hard on bees as others. Some synthetics tend to get absorbed more into the comb than others. I know that Bob Benny has done some studies and he's looked into this, and he has a chart that he's used. I've seen his chart where he compares the synergistic effects of synthetics, like using other two products at once or different things. And so maybe speak on that for a little while, the different synthetics, which you feel like are safer, maybe some that are more dangerous, and why, and the effects they have on the comb.
Well, there's not a lot of synthetics available in the U.S. market. I say that's incorrect. There still are some old products that have not worked for a long, long, long time. So there's Apistan and Checkmite. And the Apistan is fluvalinate, I believe, and Checkmite's the Kumafos, or maybe I got that one backwards. Either way, it's not really too important to me because they're both extremely nasty. They're the nastier of the synthetics. They were the older types, and they build up and comb heavily. But these are targeting different things within the mite, how they're able to detox. And I don't know how all of them work, but the advantages of the synthetic is typically there's much less damage to the bees. These are really more specifically dialed in for the pest, the Varroa, and the bees while it is not necessarily healthy for them, they're able to detox this and handle this at a much better rate versus the damage of an acid is actually closer, like a formic acid is closer to damaging a bee than a synthetic would be. Even though formic is better as it doesn't leave the residues and stuff in the hive, and these synthetics do, and they build up over time. And then Bob has a great talk on how these synthetics can also build up in that wax, and you use multiple ones, and they become have kind of a second life and can become more toxic after you've used multiple products. And so the Apistan and Checkmite do not work. Some people say that if you don't use them for a while, they'll come back and work, but I've seen some commercial guys running 10,000 hives try that out, and they're just like, I wasted a bunch of money and they still had to treat again because it didn't work. And so there's not a lot of synthetic options. Apivar was used for a really long time, and it was a very valuable product to the industry before a lot of these organic products were made available. And I've used it before, and back when it was working really well for me, it was awesome because what you do is you could put it in right now or right after the bees start brooding up, and it really didn't beat your bees up and knock them back, so they could keep brooding up and doing their thing. And then you just take them off, a handful of weeks before you put on your honey supers, and you're good. And then after the flow, let's say you didn't do that before the flow. After the flow, for me, that'd be June 15th. I strip my supers off. And then what I would do is make a split. I just cut a double deep right in half. I put a queen cell in each one and put Apivar strips in there. And the Apivar strips are so gentle on the colony that a queen can go and mate and come back and start laying. And during that brood hiccup of not having a laying queen and all this capped brood is emerging, exposing these mites, it would just bludgeon the mite population. You get a brand spanking new queen, and you give them just a little bit of feed to kind of help them through that new process and get a little bit of ground speed. And it was awesome. But Apivar has really dropped off the cliff for a lot of us. Some people are still seeing some success. Bob and I both monitor our colonies heavily with alcohol washes, and we've just not seen it work for multiple years for us. And, I've heard a lot of rumors on it was actually some batch issues as well. And let me tell you, I have some information on multiple companies on batch issues. And I've thought about it, and there's just not a lot of point in whistleblowing too much. And the people who, could back me up on it are like, we're telling you this, but, if push comes to shove, we're not backing you up on these batch issues. But multiple companies that you all are aware of, and I've named already, have had batch issues and significant ones in Italy and a couple of other countries. It made the press. Some of these companies were having such bad batch issues. This is why it's so important, no matter if you're in Australia or the US, to monitor your mite loads with mite washes, because not all colonies have the same mite load. Not all colonies are the same size. Not all colonies have the same amount of brood, and not every product works the same one year to the next. I want my bees to go through winter and look like champs and come out ready to make honey and make splits. In order to do that, I can't just trust these companies blindly. So the synthetics typically are more gentle on the bees than the organics, but you have residues in the wax, and sometimes they don't work. And maybe this Apivar 2 product will perform better than the Apivar original, but it's kind of normal for these products over time, the synthetics, for mites to adjust their DNA or whatever they're doing to be able to get immune to these things. And so Apivar actually worked for a very long time and did a good service. So maybe Apivar 2 can do something similar.
I want to address a little bit, obviously I think that most beekeepers are trying to move more towards organic or treatment free. Honestly, a lot of people are trying to do that, but I think that from what I've heard is that, there's a commercial guy here in Alabama that supposedly swears by Apistan still. He's the only guy I know that even uses it. But my concern is the buildup in the comb. And I know that's a concern for people with all the particularly with the synthetics. But my understanding is that the Apivar does not have the issue with the buildup in the comb. I know guys that use the Amitraz products over the years, whether it was off label or on label stuff, and they would have their honey, when they sell to big packers, they assess, they look for all that stuff, and that they would not see it in they just had no residual results from that. So not that you should have it, you should not have it on there with honey on the colony hive, obviously. And these people I know don't have it in there, but I don't believe, or from what I understand, the Apivar is not near as hard. It doesn't absorb into the comb as bad. It's not as
Yeah, it's not as
it's
bad.
not as bad. I don't think it's as much to worry about. And I know there are people that might judge me for using synthetic stuff, but that's okay if you want to do that.
There's people judging us
Um,
in the comments right now. We're not
I
treatment
see
free
that.
beef,
Yeah, I
Bruce.
see that.
I've
Yeah.
never heard that before. This is the first time that's happening.
But we're going to talk about that here in a minute as well. But I just, my opinion is that I am not, I am not really opposed to. I think we should try all the tools in the toolbox if we feel like they're going to work.
I agree.
If something has been proven to be dangerous or built up in the comb in the past, if it has been proven not to be effective anymore, but that's one reason I want to have this discussion, was to talk about all the options out there. And if people don't want to use it, that's fine. But one of my plans this coming year is quite possibly to use the 2.0 and see how it works.
Mhm.
And I actually hope to be able to get the rep for the company on one of these chats here soon. I actually reached out to her yesterday to see if I could get a talk with. I met her at Foxhound's opening back in a couple months ago,
Yeah,
and we
Amber
talked
is
quite. Yeah,
really
Amber's
Amber's
awesome.
awesome. Yeah, she's a
I
good
mean,
person.
and I'm hoping to get her on here one night and just really go into that, because I think that the company, the Apivar, has been beat up quite a bit publicly in the previous years and recent years,
Mhm.
and I think I'd like her to be able to. She understands the science behind it. She can talk to that a little bit more, and I think it's important, and you've mentioned this, came in the past. Just assess all the tools in the toolbox and don't throw anything away. Just keep it all available, because really what matters most is the bees themselves, and keeping
Mhm.
them healthy and alive. So
Absolutely. So, on that note, they also have the Amaflex product, and we've talked about that in the past, but it used to require a registered user permit, and that is being removed. And so it is very similar to a syringe, kind of like a mini cock type gun dealio, and you can squirt it in kind of like a gel, more of a, it almost looks like Crisco type stuff. Put it in there. It's a different release of Amatraz. Both, of course, the Apivar 2 and the Amaflex are Amatraz based. And there's a little bit of a difference between what they do. I don't understand all the technical side of stuff. What has changed? They have changed a little bit of the formulation, and I guess it doesn't take but minor tweaks to be able to make big differences. I don't fully
yeah,
understand this, and so
my
that's where maybe Amber could answer those
yeah,
questions.
and hopefully I have wrong. My understanding is that it's more of I don't know if is it more of a flash treatment? I think it may be more of a flash treatment, the 2.0, or I think that's the case. Also, I think you can leave it on closer to the honey supers. I think it's more of a flash treatment up front.
Hmm.
And then maybe it kind of, anyway, well, I'm going to try to get her on. Hopefully she can explain that. I don't want to speak out of turn here, but
Yeah,
But
Amber.
anyway, I had, once again, I had tremendous results for years with Apivar.
Hmm.
I used some off-label stuff too, but the Apivar, I never felt good doing that, so I usually use the Apivar. And but like I said, a couple of years ago, some of my colonies it didn't touch, and it kind of freaked me out. So it's been a year and a half, so maybe we'll try it again. Maybe not. We'll see what happens here.
Use it and do some alcohol washes and see how it
See what
goes.
happens.
People have had bad experiences with Formic Pro and other products as well, and thymol in the wrong temperatures is almost useless. And so there's no perfect product out there, and this is why I don't think it's good. Maybe people were to gather this. It's not good to rely on one type of treatment. I think it's really important not just to keep the mites from being able to adjust to these things. It's always good to have multiple hits on the mite population to keep them from getting immune to things, or building up immunity. But it's also just really good from a standpoint of maybe the weather caused issues with its potency, or perhaps there was a batch issue. No one's perfect, and maybe they get a new employee that didn't measure the right amount of formic acid or amatraz or whatever, and sends it on down the line, and they somehow makes it through. So this is
Yeah, I am. It's yeah, it's I forgot
whoops.
what I was going to say. So anyway,
So
uh,
I want to say thanks to Mike with
yes.
Easy Ox for putting in these pals, because I do like the oxalic acid quite a bit, but those packets are a pain in the rear as you're, because I'm usually doing like 100 colonies, that's 2 yards, and I just went through 80 the other day, and I was using one of the packets, and once this packet started getting low, it just, you don't have a whole lot of resistance against the package. So I have to put it in like a quart jar sometimes, but this is going to be really easy to just grab and tote around and just take that plunger and just push down into it and move really quick. So I like the bucket, and maybe I'm slightly partial to the red, white, and blue theme. Maybe.
Absolutely. I use I've got one of those pails now too, but I use an old Nestle Quick chocolate milk container. It's a big yellow container, so
Oh
I
yeah,
just
yeah,
dump it in
yeah.
there.
I've seen those. Um,
But I think we've kind of addressed this, so we'll just briefly throw these questions up. Mark Zenner, he asked if Apivar 2.0 permanently affects the comb like regular
it
Apivar.
does.
Yeah, as much as it affects it, I'm not sure that it affects it that much. But if it does, I think it would be a similar thing. But those are some questions I can ask Amber if I get her on. Let's see, get that one out of there. For the folks talking about, yeah, we also talked a little bit about Apivar 2.0. We're not really, Tom asked that question. We're not really, I don't think we're really versed in that as much as we need to be, but hopefully I can get Amber on to answer that question as well. I know that it does have, I'm pretty sure she told me it's more of a flash treatment. It knocks them down quick. And then I think you can leave it on closer to the honey supers coming off, but I'm not sure. So we'll ask her if I can get her on. For the folks leaving the treatment free comments, we're going to address that a little bit later. But I would like to go in, Kaman. I'd like to address now possibly some of the alternative methods that are on the market now, some of the new things such as Varroa, Apivera, and possible what you think about maybe vaccines that may help with the viruses to help cause the mites to be a little bit less potent.
Sure.
So why don't we start off with some of those things that you've heard of, and if you've heard something else that's kind of an alternative treatment, we'll talk about that, and then we'll move to the treatment free before we close it out.
So there's heat treatments, and there's a lot of these things aren't new concepts. The heat treatment's been around for decades, been around before I even got into bees, and heat does work on mites, but there's a really fine line between what kills mites and what kills bees. It's just a handful of degrees of difference, not very much at all. And the bees are really good about keeping the hive cool and keeping it warm. So it can be very difficult to get a hive, especially the entire brood, at the right temperature to euthanize the mites without damaging the colony. And so heat isn't been a very viable option. And then the best option is to shake the bees into a container where you can heat those bees to the perfect temperature and kill all the varroa mites off of them with heat. And then you have the brood that's now separate from the brood, from the bees, excuse me, the brood separate now. And so you can put it at the exact heat that you want without the bees trying to cool it down, and also do a better job with that. But it's extremely laborious. And you have to have a very, very accurate system for that, or you end up killing your bees and damaging your brood. And so it hasn't taken off because it's a very laborious system, but there are some of those models out there. So that's one system. The RNAi stuff from Varroa is a new product that is just now being sold. And some mites already express this RNAi. It's all expressed in the mites, but some of them express at high enough loads, is my understanding, that it causes them not to be able to reproduce. And so what they've done is they've observed these mites that have this, and it's a very low percentage of mites that do that, and they have basically created that, synthesized that, and then they feed it in a sugar syrup to the bees. And this, I literally just got the phone with these people because you have to use these things properly. You cannot feed this right before a flow or during a flow because the bees need to take this into their system, and they need to feed on it almost exclusively for a period, and really make sure that the bees have it in their system to where, because it doesn't affect the bees at all. We RNAi stuff all the time when we're eating, a deer, or when we're beef or whatever. There's all this stuff in the food that we eat all the time. This isn't like genetically modified organisms, or trying to splice a pig gene into a thing of corn or whatever. So we are exposed to this stuff, and doesn't affect the bees. But the mites, when they feed on the bees, the mites need to feed on the adults, and they need to feed on the brood in order to create viable brood themselves. And so understanding that, we need to make sure that when the mites are trying to feed on the bees, they're getting exposed to that and it's getting through the hive good. So if you do it right before a nectar flow and there's a lot of dilution of it, it doesn't do a good job. So for me, my honey flow starts April 1st typically, or right thereabouts. So I would feed it early March. And supposedly it's supposed to inhibit a vast majority of mites from being able to reproduce for quite a while. And I've heard anywhere from 12 to 18 weeks of very low reproduction because of this RNAi. The advantage of it is, if it works, and I haven't tried it, is that we aren't building up any toxicity in our combs. We aren't even beating the bees up. The bees just take it down like it's sugar syrup. And so if it works, that's great. The biggest problem I see right now, besides we don't know for sure if it works, two, is it's expensive at this point. And so that is an issue. I'm going to be trying it out a lot this year and seeing how well that works. And hopefully I'll have some really good news, because I think for the new issues like the Tropicolaps mite, this is the future for those issues. Beekeeping needs to be using tools, I think, that are not impacting our bees negatively. What I would call the formic and the thiamol and stuff is a hammer method. They take a toll on the bees. We would prefer something surgical, and that's what I would call something like an RNAi. So yet to be determined. It's expensive, but has a lot of promise if it can work. Now, the vaccines, we don't know enough about them. It's a virus suppression supposedly. Um, the problem with a lot of these products, it has to viruses are tricky. I mean, how many is there a way to monitor viruses? There is, but you have to send it off to a lab. You have to do some side by side tests. There's a lot of changes with how viruses impact our bees, sometimes from year to year and even from hive to hive, on who's maybe more susceptible to it or not. And so that one's really a big gray area. And the vaccines, I don't know. So we'll just have to see, I guess, about that in the future. As far as the Apavera product, it's a product that's used in agriculture, and it's a very organic. There's salts and various things in it, but it just is very natural stuff, and it's very clean for the hive. It's actually nutritious for the bees, but does have a negative effect on the mites and their exoskeleton, and just kills them. But my thoughts with all of the research I've seen on it, talking to the owners, this is again a flash treatment. But I think it has the possibilities of being more effective than the oxalic acid treatment, because it's in a liquid state versus a dry state. And my hope is that it will kill for a more extended period than the oxalic acid vapor. But yes, that one also we still don't know very much about. And so those are some of the newer products. The Terra Vera, Apavera, what all these, everything sounds the same. It's so hard. um, the nice thing about some of these newer products is hopefully they'll work as good as some of the older ones, but they're a lot gentler on the bees, and none of these are building up residues in the combs. And again, that's good for the bees. So optimistic, but also being realistic. Who knows?
Yeah. I at the conference, I watched the video. I can't remember who did it. I wish I could shout him out because he did a great job interviewing the Varroa people. Very interesting. One of my concerns with that is that first of all, you have to knock the mites down first. They recommend you go ahead and do a treatment and get the mites knocked down, if I'm not mistaken, and then you treat, and then you feed the Varroa, the product with Varroa in it. And the bees, it does suppress the mites. It keeps them from reproducing, but ultimately they'll come back in the future. So it's kind of is it worth the money? I don't know. That's some people. I know a lot of people are going to try it. I saw a lot of people hauling boxes of it out of the
Yeah,
conference. So
they sold a bunch at the
I
show.
think it's worth it. I'm looking forward to seeing people's results with that. The Apavera, I talked to the guy that does that. I may try that out. They do have a treatment. I don't know, applicator you can put on the hive and treat it, but he's just basically recommending you just kind of mix it up and basically spray it on the hives and soak the bees with it. Of course, you don't want to do that when it's cold, but as the bees clean themselves, supposedly it sounds like a really good product. I may try that. I'm not sure. I know that right now I'm kind of working with Greg on a vac. He sent me some queens that have been vaccinated, so we're going to see if where the
Hmm.
results of that are. So I like the fact that there are people out there trying different things. I think that's important. I think we just like we mentioned earlier. I think this you look at it as tools in a toolbox. You need different tools for different things, and I think there's like um my father-in-law used to say, and I think we've all heard this term. There's multiple ways to skin a cat, so I think that there's a lot of different ways
Yeah.
to do it, and we all have to find out what works best for us.
Those are some really tough times when they had to figure out multiple ways to skin a cat. Thankfully, we don't live during the Great Depression.
Oh, for
Um,
sure, for sure. I know it's more of a term than anything else, but
I know.
it's just kind of interesting. Um, the last thing I would like to talk about tonight is I want to address the treatment-free aspect, and people is I know there are people in the comments tonight like go treatment free, just treatment free, and I think that's great. If you want to do it, it's fine. However, this is one of my pet peeves with the beekeeping industry as a general rule is that there's some judgment that gets passed between people who are treatment beekeepers and they judgment passed towards treatment fee and vice versa. I think people need to figure out what works best for them and then respect other people for their beliefs and what they want to do. As long as they're doing things to keep the bees, I look at bees almost as livestock or, you know,
They
it's
were
like
they
when
are
you,
livestock. That's
as
what
soon
they're
as you
brought here.
take, as soon as you take bees out of the tree and you put them in a bee yard with 40 colonies, that's different. In nature, they don't all live in a small, you know, 8 acre space with 100 colonies in the same spot, or even 15 colonies. So it's different. Like they're passing things around, and so I think we have to be careful. I personally believe I know there are people that are treatment free beekeepers that are very successful with it, but it's not just a matter of, as you mentioned before with the Australia situation, it's not a matter of putting them in a hive and letting the strongest survive and then just rolling with it because I thought that was the way to go for a while and it didn't not work for me. And so I think a lot of people have dealt with that, but maybe address that situation, what your thoughts are on that, Cayman. And I think it's great if for people to do that and to try and figure it out. But I don't think that anyone should think that that needs to be what everyone's doing because I don't think it's going to work for everyone. To me, it takes a lot of work, time
And
and
it
effort to do that and be successful with it. You can't just, it's not survival of the fittest with the bees. You're going to lose them all.
Well, it's livestock, and I know some people disagree on how things work in nature, but if I find that it funny that most of those people don't produce food for anybody. Not trying to be mean, but uh, wanting something to be real and then also it being real are two different things. And what I mean by that, I know some people who do treatment free, but I know more charlatans than treatment free. And I've spent a career of doing this. I started at 14. I've been to these people's places. I've met Michael Bush. I've met Don the Fat Bee Man. I've met the Weaver folks down in Texas. And I've gotten into some interesting situations with people yelling in my face on stage over it. But you know what? I tried treatment free for multiple years. It didn't work for me. I know I have a couple very close friends who do treatment free. None of them just throw bees in a box and just expect it to work because it doesn't work like that. Nature does not work like that. There's a lot of death in nature. There's more death than life in nature when it comes to bees. And this was a study, and I've said this many times before, back in the 70s, before tracheal mites, small hive beetles, Varroa mites, all these issues, only 1 out of 6 swarms made it to their second season. So nature is already gunning for everything before you add these additional stressors. We also look in nature at other examples like the American chestnut. It's not extinct, but it's functionally extinct. And then we also have dinosaurs and dodo birds and a lot of things that aren't as good as they used to be. If you grow a lot of squash and zucchini and pumpkins and all that kind of stuff, we have new pests from Asia that make it much more difficult to do that. And I mean, you can try to raise resistant strains, and they have. And that's where I'll give the treatment free crowd this is genetics are always part of the solution. They always have been, but they're never the whole solution. We grow a lot of plants and stuff. I'm actually looking at a couple varieties right now. I love old-fashioned heirloom varieties. The problem with a lot of the heirlooms, they're 200 to 300 years old, some of them. Genetically, they're the same as they were a couple centuries ago. The bacterium, the viruses, the aphids, everything has continued to micro evolve over time because everything's trying to get better and survive. These mites are trying to survive. They're trying to get better as well. And so are the viruses. Everything's trying to do what it was made to do, and that's be successful at reproducing and surviving. And so it's not just our bees that do that. It's a constant battle. And there's a lot of other stressors. So that all to say that then this is just hobby beekeeping we're talking about. The intensity of professional beekeeping is a totally different animal. And the folks that produce the food, that pollinate the blueberries, the blackberries, that pollinate the onion seeds, because yeah, onion seeds need a lot of it. There's radishes and all these different things that need honeybee pollination, meadow foam seeds, and of course, all the big stuff, all the melons, pumpkins, almonds, oranges, you name it. Such a small percentage of our country now produces their own food. We must have good, healthy bees getting treated, and a treatment free just doesn't work at that scale. I know several people like Corey Stevens. I know guys, I had him speak multiple times at my show, and I've also had Adrian Quiney this year, and they are using certain types of genetics to combat the mites because some bees are better at this, and there are some better tomato strains against the genetics versus the old heirloom varieties. But there is always going to be pests. And you know what? The best thing to do to keep your tomatoes from getting a disease, it's to kill the darn aphids that weaken your plants by the thousands on your tomatoes, sucking the life out of them. And oh, by the way, spreading and injecting disease into your tomato plants, which increases the susceptibility towards wilt and disease. Mites are the same way, injecting into our bees, injecting viruses, taking their nutrition away. It's a math problem. So, what are we going to do to kill that? And if the bees can do it, fantastic. But even being realistic as a treatment free beekeeper, if someone should be doing alcohol washes, no one should be doing more of it than treatment free beekeepers because not all of your stock will be good. And you've got to be able to monitor which ones are making grade, which ones are not, and then kill the queens that are not making the grade. And then I think you should treat those because they're going to send off a mite bomb or they're going to send off a virus bomb, and everything is susceptible to something. So that I think the notion that we can just let nature take care of itself and everything will just magically work, nature has not given any indication of that whatsoever. There's a lot of things that were treatment free and no longer exist.
I tend to agree. And once again, I hear, well, and we've had Bella works in here, and they're very, obviously they are fans of treatment free, and that's great. If it's working for you, that's fine. But I think Ryan mentioned something. I think this is a true statement. Treatment free is very intentional and takes a lot of dedication. And I think that's the point, is that, when I first thought I was going to be treatment free, I just said, okay, well, if the bees die, then those aren't the ones I want. I'll just keep the ones that survive. Well, that's good and fine, except when you find out that a lot of your bees die and the ones that live aren't as healthy as they could be. Mm-hmm. And also my bees, the feral bees here in Alabama, there are some pretty rugged bees that I think are pretty mite resistant here locally, but they are just mean and nasty. Mm. And my bees had a reputation for attitude. And so that's another thing you got to think about. If you want nice, gentle bees, I think possibly you can get there and be treatment free. But I think that, it makes sense that bees that are more rugged and tough, maybe they are going to be a little more aggressive. And if you're okay with that, that's fine. I know typically Africanized bees are pretty good at dealing with mites, but you just don't want them. I don't want to deal with, Africanized bees. And so that's kind of one thing that I've experienced as I've gotten the bees that were more gentle. I do treat more, but I enjoy working my bees a lot more as well.
I definitely tried treatment free very aggressively for multiple years. And if you've read a little bit of the Bible, there's a character by the name of Saul of Tarsus. And that's kind of the way I feel about it, is I was as much of a zealot for treatment free back in my day as Saul was. But you know what? At some point, I just like it just didn't work. We tried catching wild swarms. We bought genetics from people and that were supposedly treatment free. Funny enough, all those guys have been proven as frauds at this point, or are treatment beekeepers now. Funny enough, and I know that Michael Bush has purchased several bees in the past, but it's never the mites that take their bees out. It's always something else because something else can kill them, but it can't be mites that kill their bees. And there's some of the bee weavers that have bought in semi loads of bees from other commercial beekeepers. And so if you kind of run in these circles, uh, you've come to find out that there's a lot of Don the Fat Bee Mans in the world that have a YouTube channel, they have a social media, they have a website, and it sounds great. These are better bees. They're treatment free. They're this. They're that. I'm very very skeptical because most of the people have been fraudsters. Now I spend a lot of time with my buddy Corey, and I don't know anybody that spends more time on genetics than Corey Stevens. And if I was going to start with resistant bees, I would go with his. But even with his bees, location is important. Monitoring is important, and then breeding and selecting is important. Bees thrive on genetic diversity, so trying to force bees into a pipeline of exhibiting consistent traits is very anti-honeybee. The queen wants to mate with dozens of drones. These drones have different genetics, and then if you're in a lot of areas where there's a lot of commercial beekeepers, or even just other beekeepers not doing it the same way as you, that's going to dilute those genetics down. And so location is just as much important as anything with treatment free. And then I think lastly, one thing I'll say in regards to that, the ones I know that are doing it right are all working very hard on it. And I have a lot of respect for those guys. It's a lot of work. But then there's several people on YouTube that I know that are treatment free, and every single one of them is in an area that has so many. It's like one of the best habitat locations in the US. It's so much easier to keep bees alive if you're in like the top 1% of nutrition and habitat for bees. Because if you're in a southern state, Florida, if you're in southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, parts of California, some of these areas are just ideal. There's so much more bee forage. It doesn't get that cold. And it's just more of an ideal location for bees so they can withstand more loads. They swarm more often. They survive more often because, again, it's back to math. There's more things in the bee's favor. And what I also find interesting is you get to talk to a lot of these guys in treatment free. Most of them catch swarms like all day long. So, and they lose bees, but they're in these swarm catching hubs because you know what? Florida, South Louisiana, Southern Mississippi, a lot of parts of California, there's more commercial beekeepers in those areas than any other place in North America. And these hundreds of thousands and sometimes millions of colonies shoot off a lot of swarms. And so you might think it's a feral population, but most of the time it's not. And there's a lot of dilution of genetics. So you just have to be really careful with stuff online. Just 23 years of being mostly disappointed, and there's a few people that do it well, and I think this applies in any walk of life, beekeeping or no. If it sounds too good to be true, it usually is.
Yeah, I was peeking on a treatment free forum on Facebook the other day, and one person said, "I just very discouraged. I've been trying this thing. I keep losing. I think they were a fairly new beekeeper. I keep losing my hives." And somebody, I can't remember exactly how the conversation went, but I think one of the administrators said, "Just remember, we can't discuss treatments on here." So, kind of warning people not to talk about treatments. So I was like, "Okay, whatever." But anyway, I want to go through a couple of just get through a couple of quick comments real here. We may just read them and uh, basically what you just said. I kind of do agree with Bella in this point right here. Treatment free is definitely for beekeepers, not bee havers. Why I think that's a valid comment is because you can't be a successful treatment for beekeeper without really knowing what you're doing, testing and doing what you have to do. However, there are plenty of beekeepers that are not bee havers that treat as well. So that's the defense of the treatment beekeepers.
Well, and I agree with some of that as well. But there's comments as well, like Earth is a very toxic place with any industry. We're all sold magic pills. There's no conspiracy to get people to treat at
Yeah.
all. I've been to the top of this industry, and of course, Kamel, you're just part of the system. Of course you are. There's no money in this industry. A lot of these companies I've seen more treatment companies that have come in, they go right back out because there's just no money in treatment. That's why they're charging so much for this Varroa stuff, because they have so much overhead. And it's a fact of life. Everything gets sick. Humans get sick. Some humans, I mean, I've got a buddy at church, is not that much older than me, and he was just born with a heart issue. And there's other people like that. And why him and not me? There's all kinds of what ifs out there. Life is tough and it's hard, and there's going to be issues that the bees face as well. And it's unfortunate that we do have a lot of chemicals. I like organic gardening. I like organic beekeeping, but this is also in the real world. It's tough, and if you don't have the right tools and you're in the wrong place, you may get eaten. It's tough. So I think the whole sold magic pills things, that reminds me of a video that's gone semi-viral, and it's about how medieval beekeeping is so much better than American beekeeping. It's all this AI bull crap too, which I can't stand, showing how medieval beekeeping was so much better. And then it's got like all of these views and people like, yeah, things were so much healthier back then in the Middle Ages, even though our life expectancy was like 40 years less. And we were drinking out of pewter cups full of lead toxicity. And oh, by the way, you know how they harvested honey back then for centuries? They would take the best colonies and they would gas them with sulfur because that was easier that way. And so this is why they call it the Dark Ages, because they were gassing their best hives, their best honey production hives. They would keep the hives that didn't produce honey. So you're selecting for worse genetics each year. And, so we act like things are so much worse now than they've ever been. Humans haven't changed at all. But pests do change. And sadly for our bees, when they came to the US and Canada, a lot of the pests that they had originally were left behind, even wax moss and several other things. And as we've encouraged global trade, which I'm not a fan of a lot of that. A lot of that's to deter war. That's a whole nother topic we won't get into. But anyone who's buying from China, and you're probably using a Chinese phone or some tools like that from Asia, Taiwanese chip or whatever, you're part of the problem, I suppose.
Yeah. It's almost impossible not to be involved with that. But I think that, there's just several comments. Obviously it's always a heated topic when you go through it. And Tom or Melissa, I think it's Tom probably, in all reality, nobody wants to spend money on treatments. And that's true. None of us do, but
I don't like putting a respirator on. I don't like spending the money. It's not even the money as much as the time. None of it's fun. When I'm usually treating, the bees aren't usually in the best disposition because it's either hot or it's cold or whatever. It's just more work. But genetics are part of the solution. So I don't want to leave like I'm anti-resistant bees. I totally am. But I've seen where millions of dollars have been poured into it. Project Apis M just did a bunch of research on their Hilo bees. And yeah, they're a little bit more mite resistant and they produce 30% less honey. So
it's a trade-off.
It's a trade-off. And so that works, but not if you're trying to survive off of beekeeping. I know too many commercial families right now, they're struggling because honey's like $1.80 a pound on the commercial level.
Is it something Corey Stevens talks about, how if you develop one trait that you like, you sacrifice something else? Is that something that's kind of a principle? It's really difficult to get all the traits you want in a bee. Is he the one that says that?
He says that a lot, and it's true. I mean, it's just like with goats or cattle. You breed for these big old muscled up bulls and goats, and you typically end up with some other type of genetic deficiency or issue. When we used to raise broilers by the thousands, those Cornish crosses, some people are like, well, those are genetically modified chickens. They're not. They're just a crossed hybrid of natural chickens, just like you would take multiple seeds and cross it, and they just cross until they get exactly what they want. Now, would it happen naturally in nature? Maybe once, but then it would go away because ultimately the survivability of those genetics isn't very good outside of a commercial human kept setting. But those birds, we could get them to 4.5 to 5 pounds dressed weight in 9 weeks, easy. But you would run into a lot of nutritional problems. They'd have leg problems, they'd have heart attack problems. And people are like, well, that's because they're genetically modified. No, actually, it's because they're growing in 8 to 9 weeks bigger than a chicken would normally in 6 months. So they have these massive nutritional needs, and you have to meet them in a very quick time period. And if you don't, you basically just have an accelerated decline in health versus seeing it over multiple months slowly with the regular chicken. So I think a lot of it comes down to with genetics. Yeah, that was the trade-off there. You got a fast-growing meat bird, but you had to meet these massive requirements. But you have these other chickens that are easier keepers, the more heritage breeds. They don't lay as big of an egg, they don't produce as much meat, but they're more resistant. And I think that's what we realistically can see on a consistent basis for those who do try to do the genetic game is you're never going to see full immunity with any pest, but you are going to see more resistance the more you breed from that. But you're not going to have that muscle chicken. You're not going to have that big brown egg that you're looking for. There's going to be some trade-offs in the search for that specific trait. So that's just the way it works with everything. I mean, look at me. I'm 5'6". My parents were trying to raise a superhuman. My dad picked a woman who was beautiful and short, and her parents were short, and everyone in their family was short. And here I am. No one's
Is there
perfect.
some kind of vapor we could like blow over you and you would grow 6 inches? I don't know if that works. Is there some kind of
I wish. I mean,
we could do the old Captain America thing where they inject you with some sort of a super thing and let you turn in from that scrawny little guy into Captain America. But
that was awesome.
let's there's a couple more comments. We have quite a few comments I've started, but we're just gonna hit a couple of these here. This is a good point right here, and I think Randy Oliver has a really good strategy. We had Randy on a few weeks ago, and we've had him on a couple of times. But Randy, what he's doing is he is absolutely breeding from the best. I think that he has gone a long ways towards having success with his bees are pretty rough on mites, and he has a hard time sometimes finding mites, but he is willing to treat if he needs to, but he breeds from the best, the most mite resistant bees. His number one quality that he looks for is gentleness, and then I think productivity. I think then mite resistance is on down the list a little bit, but he is working very tediously and very particularly on trying to develop bees that are the best bees possible. And in doing that, he has developed a very good bee. And so that is, I think, he's doing it the right way. That's a great comment, Mark. I appreciate you putting that up there. Kaman, can you speak to that a little bit? I know you're familiar with Randy and his program.
So I've been out to Randy's. Randy is a really intense guy and goes full throttle at whatever he's doing, but he also tries things out. And if they don't work, he'll tell you that. And he's selling his Golden West Queens right now, and I have several of them, but I've only had them since about August. And so it's not a long enough time to evaluate them, but I did get to experience his bees, and he's trying to find a sweet spot between more resistant bees, as resistant as he can get them, but still meet the needs of commercial beekeepers. And I think that's a really noble thing. And it's a hard thing to do. And he spent many, many years testing over thousands of colonies. And they even say it on the website. And this is what I love is people being realistic. About 50% of his bees don't need treated. That's a really significant number. And he's only been using the organic style treatments for many, many years. The only time he's used other ones is for research purposes, but he still doesn't have it fully dialed in on getting 100% of his colonies done. But what I do love is the fact that they're now starting to present this package available to the general public and also being honest. And this is something I find frustrating, not just with genetics, but also with the treatments we've discussed, is they'll tell you that, oh, this will get you 98%. Here's the study. Well, yeah, and that's in one study. What about all the 20 other studies? And I think this is where it's complicated. Everything is complicated, and I wish I could say otherwise, but nothing I've ever accomplished in life has come from it being easy.
Yeah.
Besides Besides, when I was a child, my parents took pretty good care of me, and I had it pretty easy back then. And then I didn't appreciate it, of course. But
For
Randy is
sure.
doing a great job, but he's still it's a constant thing, and they spend so much time working on those lines. So again, everyone that I know that is having any type of realistic results that you can go to their house or their property and see those results and know that it's not a bunch of baloney. Um, they will tell you, and you can see it is a serious undertaking. And that's where I don't recommend any new beekeepers grow the treatment free route solid. Now, if you want to start with a Golden West queen, if you want to start with a Corey Stevens queen or something that already is giving you a leg up, I think that's a great idea. And I think you should do that. But then you still need to do what they do and monitor your mite loads. And then if you get 10 queens and seven of them don't need treated, perfect. Treat the other three with an organic product and then requeen those from the champs or purchase another queen and continue that. But this, again, this doesn't happen by accident and it's okay. Nature kills bees all the time that don't meet the prerequisites for survival. So expect to lose bees. And if you're not losing bees, you're really not keeping bees, to be honest. So I lose 30% of my operation a year. So if I have 100 colonies, I know I'm going to lose 30 ish. And if I'm have a good year, maybe a little bit less. If I have a bad year, maybe 40%. But I'll take 100 colonies and I'll split that 3 times. And so I'm going to have a lot more bees. I'm going to sell some and then I'm going to have insurance colonies. And that's why I don't buy bees anymore for myself because uh, that's what bees do in nature. They swarm, they make increase, especially in nature. Wild bees will swarm multiple times a year. They don't need most of them to survive. If they just, one of them survives, they've replaced themselves and they're good.
That's
So
right.
I think we just have to kind of keep a little bit more of a like, how is nature doing things and have those expectations. But also, I don't want to go, I'm not comfortable with losing 75% either. So I'm going to, in a bad year, feed my bees. Oh, this colony's got a bad queen. I'm going to put a new queen in there. Oh, this colony's not taking care of mites very good. Nuke those mites. In a gentle way, like die.
Yeah. I think, and there are several comments. We're just probably not getting all these right now, but we've discussed a lot of these issues. But one thing, there's so many different levels of treatment versus treatment free. Some people say treatment free involves breed breaks, which I think that's a lot of. But is that really treatment free if it's a breed break? I mean, if you go right to it, or are you doing something? So, anyway, there's so many manipulations,
Yeah, I
breed breaks,
use
different
it.
things you can do. That anyway, so those are some different options. People talk about those things, and we need to learn about that. But I think once again, my thoughts are if Randy Oliver is still working on it and dialing it in, when that's all he's done for years and years and years,
Decades.
then for someone just to be someone who had bees 2 or 3 years and say you need to go treatment free, I think we need to rethink that a little bit and realize the work that goes into that. And I think you had a really good solution there, Kaman, with maybe start with some bees that are known to be mite resistant, and then breed from the best and treat the ones that aren't, and then just move forward with that. And I think that's a great way to approach that. I'm not opposed to it. I think it would be great if we could go in that direction, but I just think that we just need to be careful about that's the only way to go, and that's how some people just really get on that bandwagon, and that's all you hear from them, and they just basically they try to tell you you're the problem if you treat your bees. So
You're the reason it's not working because you're holding
mm,
the keys to the kingdom by allowing those bad genetics to survive. And
yeah,
unfortunately, we have a tropicalaps mite coming through parts of Europe and working its way through, and it's just a math problem. It reproduces so much faster than Varroa. It's going to be much more difficult for our bees because let's say there's 1,000 in there and you treat them and you knock them down to 10. Well, in a brood cycle, that number's pushing 85 to 100. And then the next cycle, do the math. It's going to be right back kind of where it was. And so they're finding that a lot of these guys are having to treat every 6 weeks. And that's money, it's labor, it's also disruptive to the bees. And I don't like to talk about this subject. It's not here, but we have to. In history, we have never successfully been prepared for any pests, and I want to change that with this one. And I'll be making some announcements on my channel about this. We need to also think not only about the United States, but I think as a beekeeping community, there's a lot of Europeans, there's a great Australian and New Zealand and Canadian and so many other great countries out there that keep bees. And we've got to, work together on these issues that constantly plague all of our industries. With the yellow-legged hornet being in Georgia and South Carolina, these are all stressors, and it's a math problem. The more we have going against our bees, the harder it's going to be. And so we need to put some serious thoughts and efforts on how we're going to do things differently. And this is where I have the biggest hope for products that are like the RNAi. We need smarter technology that's clean and gentle on our bees, lowering stress loads without adding any stress load. And I'm hopeful that we can find some stuff like that. The problem of it is, I was told that just to get that product to market was well over $10 million just to get Varroa, registered. And not that we're not talking getting, inventory and shipping to people and all the marketing and stuff, so that's expensive. That is ridiculous, to be honest. And so I'd like to see it more affordable and for more people to come into the space with creative and healthy solutions for bees to be able to protect themselves as beekeepers and also their beloved bees, with better products. But the problem of it is all of our regulations are really tied to ag, and ag has way more money than the bee industry does. And so it's hard for us to play the game because it's very expensive. And a lot of companies do not want to invest in the space because why invest 11 to $12 million into beekeeping when you can invest that into an agriculture setting and you can make, 100 times the potential income because the market's so much bigger. And anyone who kind of wonders why we don't see more innovation, because there are better formic technologies out there already. There's already research, peer-reviewed research on better deliveries of thymol and formic and other products out there. But why don't we have these yet? It's because most of these companies are also in agriculture, and the beekeeping revenue is like 4 to 5% of their company. Not all the companies are like that, but a lot of them are. And so again, they look at it from a business standpoint, and it's fair. Okay, we're going to invest a ton of money, and which ones makes the most sense? Not beekeeping, that's for sure. So I
Yeah.
think that's why we have such slow innovation in our space. We've got to start thinking a little bit differently about how things are done. I've got some ideas and I'm going to make some people upset, Bruce, but hey, I've been really good at that for a while. So it'll be all right.
Well, you've been in the mud, you've kind of been down in the trenches, and you've gotten to know a lot of these people, and you've really learned how the industry works. One thing that's unique about you and that really attracted me, what you're trying to do
Well,
many years
thank you,
ago
Bruce.
is
Sorry, I
didn't
can't
attract
help
me to you, but just what you're doing, okay?
Okay, okay.
Because that would be weird.
That would be weird.
But you told me one of the first times, I thought it's probably what 2019, 20 whenever it was, 2018, 2019. And I wasn't in bees long, and we had some, I called you and you were willing to talk to me, which I thought was pretty cool because you had about as many subscribers as I have now, but now you've much surpassed that. And back then I had very few. But you mentioned that you want to kind of figure out a way to kind of bring everyone together, bring everyone to the table, the commercial people, the hobbyists, the sideliners, and the creators, and to bring everybody to the table.
Everybody.
And I think, around the time you started the conference, you mentioned to me, you said, "What do you think about us doing a conference of some kind of convention?" And I said, "It sounds like a great idea." And you were just kind of tossing the idea around. And then obviously we see where that's come. So you've
Would
been
have never
a,
guessed.
what's that?
I said I would have never guessed. It was, I
Oh,
have
I
a lot of
know.
crazy ideas, and the fact that that one actually has done what it's done is surprised me more than anyone.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd like to kind of close up with a couple of comments we have here, and then we'll kind of close this thing out. But a couple of really good comments here. Brian Sabata with Flower Street Farm Bees says, "Healthy bees will produce and make bees and honey for the beekeeper, who helps them stay healthy." And that's exactly what we're trying to do. Whatever the method is, whatever you use, whatever products you use, that is the goal. Our goal is to keep these bees alive, to keep them healthy, so that they can help. We help each other out. It's a give and take situation, and so everyone in the chat tonight has to figure out what works best for them, whatever your methods are. We wish you nothing but success. We're not trying to say you have to do it one way or the other. Just be careful and do all you can to keep your bees alive. If it's something you love to do, and if something happens and you lose all your bees, just if it's something you love, just don't give up, don't quit. I would say just keep trying to press forward. Bella actually did have a comment here. I wanted to share a really it was a very good comment. When we were talking about Corey Stevens' comment, says there are really no solutions, only trade-offs, and that's kind of true. There's always a give and take in everything we do. I like that comment. Thanks for participating there. Savada once again says we need to support those folks who are working on mite resistant stock the right way. It's a long game and a constant process, and that's why I think we discussed that. People like Randy Oliver's, Corey Stevens, and there are many others. It's not just them.
Well, and I want to give a shout out to the Oliveras company because they're selling Randy Oliver's Golden West stock. And so one of the issues we've had is we've had a few people that have produced a better bee, but it never, okay, there's 300 for sale. Well, that doesn't make a dent. And trying to change the genetics for the better in the country. And Oliveras is one of the biggest and best queen producers in the country. And so for them to take Randy's queen and then produce it on a large scale, so people, when they buy packages or just buy a queen or whatever, maybe they do nukes locally as well. That's what I want to see is you have the person legitimately doing it, but it's actually making an effect beyond just someone, that has 2 hives in the backyard and then tells me with my hundreds of hives, hey, you need to be doing what I'm doing. I want to be able to see that get to the masses. So yeah, support those people. Genetics are always part of the solution to the problem. But there's a lot of other things to it as well, so I'm super excited about that. Support them. I'm actually going out to Oliveras in March. Chris and I are going. We're going to be interviewing them, showing some of the Golden West process and how they do things. And I can't wait. That's going to be a fun experience. And I'll be sharing that on my YouTube channel. And, I appreciate you, Bruce, for bringing me on. We've had a few of these live chats together. They're always fun. We've been able to watch both of each other and some of our friends, grow. And that's been the best part of the YouTube thing, is having more friends and be able to see you and all your buddies down there in Alabama continue to grow and what you do and dial your operation in and see your extraction equipment and see how much more efficient you're getting with your systems. That's exciting. I want to see this industry grow. I want to see the people I care about be successful. And some of the people that I care about, they're 80 years old and they're keeping 5 hives of bees and they just want to make some honey for some Christmas gifts and some friends. And they just want alive bees at the end of the day. And so that's what I'm about. So if people can have alive bees and they're happy with their bees and they're doing treatment free, more power to those people. Keep doing what you're doing. But my experience in hundreds and hundreds of thousands really of people that I know have tried treatment free and not been successful. And my mission when I started my channel was to help those people be successful. And so I'm going to do whatever I can. Doesn't mean I'm always right. And there's things we didn't even talk about that probably work or are useful. And that's kind of the beauty of beekeeping. But at the end of the day, it doesn't need to be about our system. It just needs to be about helping people have success in whatever way that is. And for me, that's making sure that I make the payments on my trucks and stuff like that. Because Laurel says if I don't, then she's gonna get rid of my trucks, and boy, I hate for that to happen.
A couple of quick comments as we kind of close this thing out. First of all, like to DC had a nice comment here. Kaman, it's great to see you on the lives again. Missed you. Be sure to get rested before Nabi 2027.
Yeah, get rested. Yeah, right.
Rest is yeah.
Thank you.
Then Carmen said, what Kaman has done for the advance of beekeeping is understated. I agree with that, Kaman. We appreciate you coming on. I want to bring Brian in. He has been behind the scenes tonight. We appreciate you being here, Brian, and helping manage the comments and everything behind the scenes. He is our version of Chris. Nobody's exactly like Chris is, and
they're both from Ohio too. Yeah. What's up with that?
Exactly.
But both Buckeye fans, we're both Alabama fans funny
Yeah.
enough. But Brian, he's an awesome guy, done some cool things. You know, no one's perfect. Ohio State is not a great football team.
Not this year, not like they were last year.
Well, we can't say much as Alabama fans either. We just
Yeah,
got
true that.
Alabama took our britches, yanked them down, and paddled our hind end on national television. It was pretty rough.
You see Chris's comment down there.
Yeah. Here come the Ohio Stooges. Yeah, I love it though. And you know, funny enough, the more I've got to hang out with guys like Chris and Brian, the more I've actually sometimes found myself pulling for Ohio State in games that we weren't playing Alabama, just because I care for my buddies so much. I want to see them happy. And same way with, you know, guys like Corey Stevens. And then when you meet these people in person, you see the passion, you see them working out. You're rooting for those guys. Oh man, if I knew that Punk was back on here, I would have caused problems. Oh, that Punk was back there. Yeah. Well, you know, we have a good time, and ultimately it's not just about the bees, it's about the beekeeping community. There's so many awesome people in this industry, and I've been so blessed to be able to travel a bunch with it. And even going up into Canada and getting, you know, you just don't know what to expect up there, and going over to Denmark for Apomondia. The beekeepers are just really awesome people no matter where you go, in my experience. And so it's always fun, it's always a pleasure. And thanks, you know, for having me on. You know, there's no place I'd rather be. When we had a busy schedule today, I'm like, yeah, can we move it back to 7:30, Brian, Bruce, because I couldn't make it any earlier than that. But I was excited to come on because I just enjoy hanging out with you guys and talking bees.
Before we close this out, I don't know if you probably don't know anything about this, Kaman, but Brian Lee's on here, and I left his comment. Thanks for the super chat for those who donated tonight. But
I know Brian Lee.
I know you do, but yeah, probably a year and a half ago, I don't know when it was, on a live chat, Greg and Brian Lee, yes, they came up. He came up with this idea of Bruce's Bodacious Body Bars, which I thought was the craziest thing. So Brian Zavada actually made some and brought them to the conference. So it actually looks like a pretty good product. Maybe
I wish you would start using it.
Yeah, I probably need to. But
yeah, that's right.
Before we move up,
maple bacon.
It smells pretty good though.
Man, who smells delicious in this conference?
Bodacious, right?
That's
yeah. Someone asked me, is it the body or is it the bar? I'm like, it dang sure isn't the body, so it must be the bar that's bodacious. But anyway, Brian, you got any comments? Anything you'd like to talk about here? Or appreciate you coming in and helping us out tonight, man.
Yeah,
thanks. I agree with everything that was said.
Well, I said stuff about the Buckeyes that, you know, they like, the one guy says here that Buckeyes are a useless nut, and I just said it too. And so, I mean, I appreciate you finding sense finally, Brian.
The only thing that I found a use for Buckeyes when I was a kid, if anybody has ever seen a Buckeye when they fall off of a tree, they've got all those spikes on them. So we as kids would always hide behind the trees and chuck them at each other. You know, we used them as like a weapon. So other than that, I don't know what they're good for.
He's got one.
Yeah. Get one that's in the in the casing though on a tree. It's got all these spikes.
This one right here I have had for probably 20 something years. And yeah, so there was a gentleman down here in Tennessee, and an older gentleman went to church with, and he had Parkinson's, but he's Kaman, you need to have one of these around, because if you keep it in your pocket and you rub on it, eventually it's going to bring you lots of luck. If you're thinking, I would really like to have a date with that girl, this right here, this will lead you right to the right one. And you know what? I gave it a shot. I found Laurel a year or two later, and she was really into Buckeyes as well. And Laurel makes stuff out of all kinds of things outdoors. She's really creative, and she's doing stuff with Buckeyes and things. So, you know, they're not useless. They're kind of cool. And if you hit someone with a slingshot, that'll leave a welt.
True.
Adam says he doesn't like Buckeyes. He has one right in his office.
Exactly.
Anyway, any final words came in for us before we close it out?
You know, everybody just keep enjoying your bees. You know, this season's going to be here really soon, and for some people really far south, I mean, it's really starting. I
It's
mean,
here,
in
yeah.
Tennessee, I'm going to get my maple pollen probably here in the next 3 to 4 weeks at the latest, and so the bees are going to start brooding at that time. And so we talk about all this work, we talk about mites and stuff, but you're already doing this was me especially. You're doing 80% of the work, everybody, already. That extra 20% of thought and effort put into your bees is going to have live bees in your hives. And when I finally got over that period where I'm like, yes, I'm going to take the time to strategize my mite plans. I'm going to be diligent about how much food is in the hive, and I want to put that extra 20% into my schedule. You really start having a lot of live bees, and then you run into this issue of you have too many. And that's where I know not all of us have the same ambitions, but we all like having healthy bees in our hives and not having to buy them from year to year. So just to keep up the good work and enjoy the bees. Every year is so beautiful, seeing the flowers bloom and seeing our bees work it. So enjoy that side. This isn't just about honey production. This is also about being a part of nature and learning more about the plants and the bees each year. And it's a journey, and definitely take the time to enjoy it.
Thanks again, Kaman, for coming on tonight. Thanks, Brian, for being in the back office. And we appreciate everyone for being on here tonight. We wish all of you, whatever your strategy is for taking care of your bees, we hope that you have success in the upcoming weeks, months, and years. And, all of us on here obviously have a tremendous passion for the bees, or we wouldn't be on here. We wouldn't have channels. We wouldn't want to share these ideas with you. So, I hope you'll think about the things that were talked about tonight. I hope you'll consider them. If you weren't able to watch the whole thing, maybe you'll go back and watch it from the beginning. There was a lot of, I think, valuable information from Kaman on here. We talked about a lot of things, a lot of different treatments and concepts and ideas. So hopefully it'll be a benefit to you. We appreciate all for being on here tonight, and y'all take care, and we'll catch you next time. See you later.